The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We are coming to you live from various places around, I guess, all around Southern California this morning. Thrilled to be here with you on this Monday morning and to keep the conversation going. We're here for the next hour and we're going to be talking about autism from a 360-degree perspective. But I really want you to know that the show is meant to be interactive. Now, I know that everybody can't watch the show live because other things are going on in life and in the world and whatever, and that's okay. There are lots of places to watch us live. There's lots of places to watch us recorded, and you can go back through time. If you, like me, are a little bit sick of the background of people's houses, someday we'll have to do like a tour of my bookcase and then I'll move things around. But if you're kind of sick of that and you want to see something that's from the days when we weren't having to do this way, let me just tell you that we've got 9 years worth of stuff that is cached on our 2 different sites. Excuse me, you can go to YouTube and all of it's there, but it's also on our homepage, which is autism-live.com. So if you look at this chart here, autism-live.com is on the bottom, and that's available to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There is a chat button so that you can be chatting with me live. There's also toy guides there from last year and the years before to help you if you're looking for a toy for anyone or a gift, including for parents of individuals who are on the spectrum and adults who are on the autism spectrum. We're very proud of that. We're just now gearing up to start working on this year's toy guide. But so lots of things to do, and you can search by topic or guest or anything. You can put anything into the search feature on our homepage. But take a look on the first column here are all the places where we are live right now. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube. Then later on, those, it'll be recorded and available on those sites, but then we add in the podcast sites, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Deezer, just to name a few places where we're available. But I want to point out that we're free on all of those places. And that's super important to me because when my son was diagnosed with autism, and in those early days when I was up a tree, I was like, I don't know. And you Google autism and man, it's the Wild West, right? And you're going to find a whole bunch of things and you just don't know which way is up. I wanted to be able to find a place where I could learn things in depth, like a conference, but I couldn't go to an 8-hour conference. Who's got that kind of time, especially when you're in the early days of autism? I mean, seriously. And I didn't want to have to go someplace else, and I didn't have any money. And even getting to the library to check out books was hard, because just like, that meant putting my child in a car, going someplace, and having to corral him while I looked for books. So I wanted there to be a place that you could find 24 hours a day, 7 days a week that was free. Free to everybody, not just free here in the United States. We have more and more people joining us from around the world. Oh my gosh, that just fills my heart with joy because there was a day when I was on my kitchen floor. This happened in several rooms, not just one. But I also know it happened in the bedroom too, that I was on the floor on my knees and praying and saying, please help me to help my child. He was diagnosed at 2.5. And I was saying, please help me to help him. Don't let my story be that I'm the mom who couldn't figure it out. Please help me to know what to do, make it clear. because the way I pray, I'm very frank with with my belief systems, and I'll say, please make it clear, because you know how I am. Sometimes I miss stuff, right? And I promise that if you help me to know what to do for my kid, I promise I will do it. And I promise I will help others when my kid is doing better. And that's why I'm here. Let's be abundantly clear about that. That's why I'm here. That's why I care. That's why I try to do whatever I can for you. That's why I ask you to write in, put me to work, ask me a question. If I don't know, because let's be honest, and I like to say this at the beginning of the show, I'm not an expert in autism. Yes, I've been hosting shows about autism now for over a decade, and I've interviewed a lot of people. I won't say that I've interviewed everyone, because that would be ridiculous, right? But I've interviewed a lot of people, a lot of experts, and I've learned a thing or two. Yes, that's true. So I have a very vocal opinion. I like to say that it's an informed opinion, but that's relative too. But I'm not an expert. Let's be abundantly clear, right? But I really wanted to make sure that there was a place where somebody was giving you the opportunity to find your answers. And when I say your answers, I'm talking about that great, big, beautiful autism community. If you yourself are on the spectrum, for heaven's sake, it starts there, right? With those individuals, helping them to answer their questions and to give them a voice here on the show. And but then from there, I also welcome the larger autism community, which is everybody who cares about those individuals on the spectrum, right? Because we have a voice in this equation to be able to help those individuals, to help fight for the support and the dignity and the education and the employment and the housing and all the things that the people we love on the spectrum so richly deserve. So that's what we're about here. Not about telling anyone who they need to be, how they need to be. I just want to be abundantly clear. But when you have had the experience, as I have had as a parent, where my son was face down in the hallway, the front hallway of somebody's house, crying and saying, please, what do I have to do to get them to play with me? He just wanted to know, how do you get the other kids to listen and play with you? And I, as a parent, listened to that and was very clear that I wanted to help my child to do the things that he wanted to do. And it's not a one size fits all. I want you to be able to help yourself to do the things that you want to do, and to be able to help the loved one that you have on the spectrum to do the things that they want to do. Not one size fits all. So I hope you feel the love. That's what we're here for. We love it when you write in. It's my favorite thing. I will say that, there's been a couple of things kicking everybody's keister for a while here. We're all struggling with the varied things with COVID. Either you don't have enough work, or you're working all the time. Like some people are in financial worry, some people are in health worry. Everybody's fond of saying we're all in this together, but everybody's boat is different in this COVID thing. So we keep talking about COVID from a perspective of the autism community, and how can we keep progress happening during this pandemic here in the United States and around the world, right? So we're talking about that. We cannot just say that we are not going to talk about the other things that are going on in the world, which is why we're very clear here at Autism Lives that we support Black Lives Matter, and that we believe that we can do better, and it's got to start with us, and we're trying to do better. I want you to know that tomorrow on the show, we're welcoming back to the show Ifunanya Nweke, who has been on our show many times before. She's the creator of Jazz Hands for Autism, and we have so much to talk with her about. But she had posted something a week ago saying, okay, this is a kind of have, but who's ready to talk about the fact that there's a population of Black young men who have different degrees of neurotypical disorders, and that they are also caught up in this interaction with the police where things aren't going well. And she said, who's ready to talk about that? And we have to be ready to talk about that here on Autism Live. So Ifunanya is going to be here tomorrow, and we're gonna talk about it. And I need help. I don't know about you guys, but I need help. I need to know what I can be doing. because I want to be a part of things being better, and I don't want to be a part of things staying the same. And I think that everything that we do is either in support or not. And I want to be in support. I feel very motivated about that. And I hope that you guys are too. Okay, so, and then the third thing that we are talking about here that has been kicking my keister for a while is the loss of our dearly beloved Joanne Lara. And I want to announce here on the show that we are going to be hosting a online memorial for Joanne a week from Saturday on the 27th. And that's going to be at 10:30 Pacific time because we need to accommodate time zones around the world. So that's the 27th. We're going to be talking a lot about that coming up to it. And give everybody an opportunity. It's so difficult. I've watched so many people during this COVID pandemic lose a loved one. And grief is hard no matter what. But there are some very distinct things about this pandemic and grief and how, I said to somebody, we're not getting to do the things that make you feel better. The things that allow you to bring up the things and to fall into your friend's arms and have a good sob over, seeing a scarf or, this weekend, Joanne was a big fan of old movies. And, all I have to do is go by, typical on a Sunday for us is to spend half the day on the phone while she's watching an old movie and like telling me things about different scenes and, oh, this is, and did you know this about it and whatever. And I happened to see what was on yesterday and just, burst into tears. So I think it's important that for everybody who knew her, to have an opportunity to gather together, even if virtually. I promised her that we would. And we'll do an actual in-face one later on. But I welcome anybody who's in grief that this is a safe space to write about, what you're going through and to join us for Joanne's memorial, but to this expression of a celebration of life, but a release of grief. So, okay, so somebody has already written in and said, disappointed by this video intro. I advise looking into long-term effects of ABA therapy on adults and spend time speaking to adults and children that are actually autistic. And I want you to know that we do. If you watch more than the intro, you'll see that we feature lots of individuals here on the spectrum. Happy to have you here on the show too, if you want to write in and pitch an idea for a segment. And we talk a lot on this show about the fact that there are lots of individuals who are on the spectrum who are not fans of ABA, and I support you in your right to say whatever you want to say. That's like the beginning and the end of the conversation. I will tell you that I have invited many adults on the autism spectrum to come and see modern ABA and to see the ABA that the Center for Autism and Related Disorders does, because I had the opportunity for 5 years to watch either in the room or on a baby monitor and watch what happened with my son and to see who he is now. And I cannot speak favorably for all ABA. And I cannot speak favorably for all ABA across the years because I understand some of the things that used to happen with some of the ABA providers. And I totally agree with you that there are long-lasting effects for individuals who did that. I just want to say to you that I'm a parent that would not allow that for my son. And there are a lot of parents that would not allow that. And there is a governing board now with certification for people that does not allow that. I would love to see Judge Rottenberg's center shut down. And I almost said a 4-letter word. I agree with you that there are a lot of bad things that are happening out there, and we urge parents here to be careful and to make sure that they're doing quality ABA. And if you are open to seeing what that looks like, and I know it could be traumatizing because of the things that you've been through or things that you've heard, but if you're open to it, I will absolutely make an arrangement for you to see what it is that we're talking about here, because what good quality ABA did for my son was amazing. And believe me, I would not have stood for someone punishing him for who and how he is, or in any way. So I thank you for your opinion. I thank you for writing in. I think it's an important part of the conversation, which is why I'm not skimming over it. But I hope that we can help to heal and to move forward and continue to have progress for all individuals and give everybody their right and their ability to speak forward. I want to say hi to Faith. Faith, I'm so happy to see you. And I've been keeping up with you on Facebook and thrilled that you're here. Michelle, thank you for being here. Christy, welcome, welcome, welcome. And Nikki, good morning to you. All right, you guys, it's time for us. It's Monday, so it's time for us to journey to our jargon of the day. This is when we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym. We try to figure out what in the hey nani nani are the experts talking about. Why are they talking about it? Why does it matter? Why do we have to know? Can't we just stop? Anybody ask me how I really feel about jargon. But it is important that we start to learn things. Now, today's jargon term is one that a year ago, I don't think I'd even heard of. Somebody said it about a year ago on the show, and I was like, I'm sorry, the what? And I was like, what did you just say? And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't completely have my head wrapped around this. And you know how I know that is because somebody asked me to define it the other day without slides. And I was like, oh, I wish I had an expert here. But this is why we do the jargon again and again, because we're all learning together. So Autoclitics, we've been talking about the verbal operants. And so this is the mountain on the hill, the last of the verbal operants that we're going to talk about. And not everybody does talk about this one. So why would we talk about it? Let's take a look and see what our actual definition is, see if we need waders to wade through it, and then we'll move to the working definition and see what we can figure out. Autoclitics, interesting, right? So autoclitics is a verbal responses that modify the effect on the listener of the primary operants that comprise B.F. Skinner's classification of verbal behavior. An autoclitic is a verbal behavior that modifies the functions of other verbal behaviors. Okay, so verbal responses that modify the effect on the listener of the primary operants that comprise B.F. Skinner's classification of verbal behavior. You know, it's like, I'm no closer. I can reread it, and I'm like, mush. It's just all mush, right? Okay, so let's move on to the working definition here and see what in the hey nani nani are we talking about. Autoclitics are things that you add to verbal communication that change how the listener interprets what is said. So here's my understanding of autoclitics is that it involves perspective taking. So if I say to you, I'm having a really good time. What I said was, I'm having a really good time, but you took meaning from it and you might have thought, oh, I don't think she's having a really good time. So what was it that gave that away? What was it that you thought through and ciphered through and went, well, I think if she was really having a good time, she might have used a different tone. Her facial expressions might have looked different. So that's in the neighborhood of autoclitics. But it's from the expressive side, right? But we pretty much every one of the verbal operants, we want to work on both expressively and receptively. So first of all, as an individual, I want to be able to communicate as fully as I can. And being able to say to somebody, yeah, I think I can do that, right? Conveys a whole lot of meaning. It's like what, you know what it is? It's the thing that gets taken out when you text, right? If you had no emojis and you were just texting, you know how confusing it can be because you're like, well, did they mean that this way or did they mean that way? It's hard to tell because I don't have the nuance. I didn't see the face. I didn't see how they said it, right? And we use emojis to kind of give clues to what is really happening. That's autoclitics. right? And we are meaning to convey information when we do that. So if you ask me to do something and I go, yeah, I think I can do that, I'm sending you a whole ton of information, right? But it's got to work both ways. I have to be someone who understands facial expressions, tone, and all the different things, prosody, all the different things that are in that intonation, to be able to take meaning, so that, for instance, if someone says to a person who has a ASD diagnosis, yeah, I think I can do that, right? That person needs to be able to realize that's not really a hard yes, right? And this is where confusion ensues, right? Just like when you text and you don't have emojis. So Autoclitics, really high level perspective taking communication that is tough to put your finger on, right? But think about being in a relationship with someone, friend or romantic, and all the different times that there's nuance, because you know the person and because you're listening and you're tuned in. And if you weren't tuned in and didn't know Autoclitics, there would be times, and listen, in every life, there are times when somebody misinterprets something. And you have to then use a skill called repairing the conversation, where you back it up and go, hey, I'm not sure, were you meaning that sarcastically? But in order to say that, in order to say, hey, I'm not sure, did you mean that sarcastically? Think about all the skills you have to have. You have to understand what sarcasm is. You have to have a certain level of perspective taking, right? And you have to have strong autoclitics, plus the ability to advocate for yourself and the willingness to put yourself out there to try to repair a conversation. So Autoclitics, really high level, but I think worth working on. For a lot of the adults that I talk to on the autism spectrum, they're, the kinds of things that they say that they're unhappy with and struggling with are things that, well, I think about that movie, The Story of Luke. And there is a moment with Seth Green where he's at the water cooler with this young man, Luke, because Luke is just like, I don't get it. What's happening right now? And he calls him over to the water cooler, and they're standing there watching a girl and a guy talk. And he goes, okay, here's everything that's happening right now. And he explains it to Luke. And it's crazy because it's like all these things that, like, some things that I hadn't even thought about that are happening. And Luke's like, really? That's all happening right there? And Seth is like, yeah, that's like reality. That's what's going on. And I hear a lot of adults on the autism spectrum saying, what is the magic code? Because I don't really care about all that, but I'd like to be able to date. And I really like this other person, and I'd like to have it work out. And I don't know why it keeps not, just like, give me the code. I don't really care about all the other BS. Just give me the code so that I begin to understand. And you see, Autoclitics is part of that code. It's like the emojis of life, to be able to read something going on and to use an emoji when you're talking so that the people around you understand what it is that you're saying, so you can get your needs met. It's not about conforming. It's about getting your needs met. So anyway, that's Autoclitics, a little convoluted. There we go. Moving on, we always have a question of the day. And our question today is, how do you talk to yourself when you're stressed? I imagine that everybody's gone through a little bit of stress in the last couple of months. And, there's always a conversation that we're having with ourselves, or at least there's always an opportunity to have a conversation with ourselves. And a lot of times what we are thinking about and saying to ourselves is a large part of what our experience is. So what do you say to yourself when you're stressed? I waitressed many, many years ago, and there was a waiter, and his name was Robbie. And I love to watch what Robbie work because he would talk out loud to himself the entire time. So we'd be in the kitchen and, you'd be slammed and there's just like no way that you're going to be able to help all the people and get all their food hot to them and keep them happy and not have them waiting because the host was an idiot and would always seat an entire section together, which is not how you do it, right? But I love to listen to Robbie because he would talk to himself and he would talk positive to himself. So he'd say, go, Robbie, go, 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 you can do it, Robbie, go. And I loved that. And he was one of the best waiters because he was talking to himself in this positive way and urging himself on, where, there was another girl who would just stand in the corner and cry. And we were always saying, that's not helping anything. Like, either, do something, right? But standing in the corner, crying, being overwhelmed is not ending the overwhelmed, right? Eventually the shift will end and you will get to go home and this will pass. Although I still have nightmares about working at that restaurant. But whenever I'm stressed and need to get something done and need to keep moving, I find myself saying, go, Robbie, go. Because he was so inspirational. So how do you talk to yourself when you're stressed? And there's many different types of stress, right? What is the conversation that you have in your head? Is it kind? Is it inspirational? Is it loving? And something that somebody else taught me too is that sometimes it's hard to be kind and loving and gentle with ourselves. And they said, always put it through the litmus test of, if you were talking to a child or a teenager, going through what you're going through, what would you say and how would you say it? And how supportive would you be? And are you that supportive with yourself? For me, that's everything. Because when I think about, if a 15-year-old girl were going through something that I was having a hard time with, what would I say to her? And I know for sure I would not say to her, well, you brought this on yourself, right? I would never say that to a 15-year-old girl. So I really shouldn't be saying it to myself. So are you talking lovingly and gently and kindly with yourself about your stress? And can you, if you're not, can you pick something else and imagine that you're talking to, a 12 or 13 or 15-year-old kid, and how would you say it to them? All right, moving on to our topic of the week. And I think that this will dovetail nicely into everything that we talk about, is what are you focused on? As we've talked about all the different, obviously there's a lot to be stressed about right now, right? But we get to pick in the sea of things what we focus on. And there's a lot going on. It's like people are posting about the COVID and saying, well, this is, none of us would have chosen this, but here are the 12 good things that have happened. I love John Krakowski, is that his Krakowski, his Some Good News. I love that he's decided to focus on, well, here are the positive things. It doesn't wipe away it's not negating the other things that are happening, but it's giving us that broader global view. And even the things that are hard and challenging right now, what part of it do we want to focus on? For me, I want to focus on being a part of the solution, which means not being complicit in keeping it the way it is. That's what I'm trying to focus on right now. How am I complicit? How has my silence added up to the reality of what is, and how can I change that? I don't know yet, and I'm looking for help, but I know that when the student is ready, the teacher arrives. And I'm hoping that my teacher, I'm listening. There's plenty of teachers that are out there, and I'm hoping my teachers will help me to rise, and that all of us will rise to something better. You know what I'm saying? But what are you focused on? I've had to do that about my friend dying and saying, what part of this do I want to focus on? It's very hard. I want to focus and be despondent about the fact that the way that she went was during a time period in which it sucked. I'm just not going to candy coat it, right? Like my brain wants to focus on that. And then I have to remind myself that's true. But it is what it is. And is there any part of it I can change? No. What do I have the capability to focus on right now that I could change? And I can help to have her legacy live on through her work. I can do that. And then, my boat tilts a little bit better to the good, and I go, okay, now I've got something to do. So my question to you today is, what are you focused on? I am focused on making the most of this time. I am focused on being there for my son, making sure that he gets the education that he so richly deserves, that he finishes. He's a senior now, folks. He's got to finish high school, and we got to get him ready for college. And somehow we got to do that during COVID times. Not what I planned. Not what I planned. But, there are some things that can be focused on and worked on during this period of time that we have time for, that maybe we wouldn't have before. So those are the things that I'm trying to focus on. I'm also trying to focus on being healthy and drink more water. You're going to see me drink more water on the show because I'm dehydrated, and that's not a good way to be. So what are you focused on? Please write in and tell us. Again, I said this to you guys last week. I need you right now. I need for you to be writing in and talking with me because it's tough. It's tough right now. It's really, really tough. So write in, be with me, be here. Okay, we got a great show for you today. We are welcoming back to the show, of course, because it's Monday, our fabulous, fabulous legal counsel that helps us sort through what's legal and what we should be doing. Bonnie Yates, special education attorney from the Tollner Law Office, is joining us any second. And then we're also going to be looking to have some time to talk with you guys about things that you need to talk about. So Traven, is Bonnie with us yet? See, I drank water. I don't know if Bonnie's there. Ms. Bonnie. And while we're waiting to see if Bonnie is here, I want to remind everybody that she is with Tollner Law Offices, and it's just a little too close, right? It's like, you do not need to get that close to my face. Bonnie is a special education attorney, and what she does is answer questions for us that you guys write in, and then she also gives us the 411 on things that are happening, especially during this COVID time, about things that are happening in special education, because most of you, your child has an IEP or a 504 plan, and that is something that needs to be followed. And if you have an IEP, then you have services that you were supposed to be getting, and almost nobody that I can think of that I know got all of those services during the last 12 weeks. So what happens? Is it just like, sorry, we weren't able to give it to you? No. What happens is we have a discussion about how to give you compensatory education during the summer, whether that's extended school year or, she may not have the code, Traven. If you could just give her the code, that would be grandiose. I appreciate you. But it's so important. We had somebody who wrote in last week who was kind of mad and said, I thought I was being considerate. I thought, I was cutting the school some slack. It didn't appear that they had anything together. I asked a couple of cursory questions, and, they didn't have much that they could offer my child. And they said that they were working it out. And then they found out, the parent recently had conversations with other parents and found out that other kids were getting private tutoring, and they were getting all of these different things. And her child was not. And, what to do now once you find something like that out. And I got to say that having, not during COVID, but having been there and done that, when you find out that you didn't know to ask for a specific thing, but other people did, and so they gave it to their kids and they just didn't bother to tell you, that's when everything starts to tilt, and you find yourself in a difficult place. I want to say that Bonnie is not here and we're figuring that out, but another person has written in and said ABA therapy is not the answer. So we have a minute, and we had somebody else who at the beginning who felt very strongly that ABA and that I should be speaking to adults that are actually autistic. I want to say, let's go over, while we're waiting for Bonnie, a brief history about ABA. what ABA is, what ABA isn't, and what modern ABA is. Because I do think that these are important things. And as I said at the start of the show, I welcome your opinion. And I want to say that everyone is entitled to their opinion. And I don't try to squash that at all on the show, because I'm about having, I just don't think that there's anything more important to me than people on the autism spectrum having a, as Joanne would say, a seat at the table and the right to their, I don't even want to say voice, because that's so ableist, right? But a right to be able to communicate their needs, their wants, their thoughts, right? In whatever way is appropriate for them. So I'm never ever going to be like, you know, you don't get to say that. That would be completely antithetical to who I want to be and am. But I will say this, that you know, let's put it this way. And this is a bad analogy, but I once went to a a day spa and had a very bad experience where the person who did my nails did it, and I didn't know any different because it was the first time that I was going, but it was painful. I ended up with an infection in one of my fingers, and I was like, well, that's horrible. I'm not doing that ever again. And I haven't. I've never gone and gotten a manicure. I'm, 57 years old, never gone and gotten a manicure again. And for years, I was like, those places are horrible because that's what they do and they're unsafe and blah, 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 blah. And I have friends who are like, Shannon, that is not what my place is like. When I go to my place, that is not what it's like. They have laws that govern them. That's not going to happen again. I still don't want to go. For me, I don't want to go. And I know that for a lot of adults who are on the autism spectrum, ABA is, you're not fans. And in fact, you feel traumatized when it comes up and when it's talked about, and that either you or your friends or family members were traumatized. And I just want to be clear that I don't disavow that at all. That in the early days of ABA used for autism, there were people who experimented with aversives. That is absolutely true. I stand by your truth. And that to me is unacceptable and torture. And I don't agree with it. And I would not subject my child to it. And I don't advocate that anybody subjects their children to that. So let me be carte blanche about that. And they did investigate what aversives were like. Kids got their hands taped so that they couldn't stim. There were kids that got hot sauce put on their tongue. There were a whole bunch of things that were done to individuals to see if it changed and shaped the behavior in a different way. Let me just tell you, I'm not about that. Would never allow that to happen to my son. Heaven help the person, whoever, if anybody had ever tried that with my son. And back then they weren't calling it ABA, they were calling it behavior modification. Okay, and then a shift came about and modern ABA took shape, and there is now a governing board. In order for people to design a program and train other people to do it, they have to be a board certified behavior analyst. There is an ethics clause. They have entire symposia about the dignity of the individual. And that is what I'm talking about. Now, even with all of that, because ABA is just ABA for autism, because ABA is used for lots of things. ABA is used for Olympic athletes. ABA is used in business corporations. ABA is used in nursing homes, right? It's used across the board because it is, and this is the truth, it is the most effective teaching tool because it says, you want to learn something and we want to teach it to you, but we're not going to teach it to you all at once. We're going to teach you this little part of it so that it's not overwhelming. It works. It works. The main principle of ABA is that everything that we do because it's rewarding in some way. It is not about the aversive. So modern ABA says, hey, Bonnie, I'm just finishing up a little discussion about ABA because we have some people watching the show today who are not fans of ABA. And I always like to give voice to that, but to remind everybody that, quality ABA is an amazing thing. And it is not something that should leave somebody traumatized. So just wanted to put that button on that. But I welcome all opinions. And it does make it possible for individuals to find their way to communicate, which I think is everybody's right on this planet. So, Miss Bonnie, how much do we love you today? We love you a lot. You're muted though. You are muted. Can you unmute yourself?
Okay.
There you are. Good morning. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. How about you, Shannon?
Good. And I talked just briefly before about the fact that you're joining us under the auspices of the Tollner Law Offices. Maybe you could talk briefly about them and about where people can reach you and the disclaimer.
Sure. So Tollner, spelled T-O-L-L-N-E-R, Law Offices. We're an 8-attorney firm. We do special education, regional center, civil rights, disability discrimination, and university cases, which is, people run into all kinds of problems with accommodations in college. We are San Jose. My office is in El Segundo. We have another office in Anaheim, in Irvine. Our longer term goal is to also start representing people in parts of the state where there isn't a lot of attorney coverage, like Bakersfield, Fresno, Northern California. And we think we're going to be able to do more of that now due to the success. There have been some very positive sides to all the digital interaction we've been engaging in, even though I, don't think I would have ever volunteered for it. So we're answer questions on this show if you have them about your rights, DEA and other pertinent statutes. It's not a substitute for good, solid legal advice about your own case. If you're in California, you can reach out to me for a free consultation if you'd like that. If you're in another state, COPA, Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates, COPAA.net is a good place to start in terms of looking for an attorney in your state who's knowledgeable about special education. I would just add, in general, if you are having trouble finding a reputable attorney in your state for whatever area the area is, you can always talk to your state bar, because they have directories of people according to specialties. That could be really important if, let's say, you had a family law matter, since those cases are so contentious and they are so expensive. That would just be one example. But if you're getting stuck, the thing about attorneys is there's always an attorney to fit every need, just about. So it's just a question of finding them. We were talking last week about things that appeared on the Special Ed Connection legal database, information for educators and school district attorneys. I'm going to continue with some of that because I don't think we have any questions. Is that right?
We had two questions that came in quite late on Friday, and I didn't send them over to you. They're kind of general, and I don't know if you want to wait and do those next week, or if you want me to tell you what they are.
I think I'm going to have you send them to me. I'll off air. I'll look at them and see if I need more facts, and we'll do them next week.
Fabulous.
You guys, when you send the questions, we will always preserve your confidentiality, but the more specific you can be about, state, age of child, disability, do they have an IEP or 504 plan? That's all important because the answers vary depending on those things. So
Paige has written in and asked for a link where we can go to for it. And I don't know which it you're talking about. Are you talking about Tollner Law Offices, the learning thing, or quality ABA? Why don't we give her all three? If she wanted to, is there a link to where she would go to Tollner Law Offices?
It's very easy just to Google it.
Okay. And then for the space that you went to, is it something for this learning? I can't remember.
That's not accessible to the public. I have a subscription.
Okay. So there you go. And then for, for my money, if you want good quality ABA, my child was treated at CARD. And so I encourage you to go to centerforautism.com for the highest quality of ABA. Okay, so Bonnie, what are we going to talk about? What is on that site this week?
We're going to talk about where we are now. Okay, we're going to talk about where we are now. And first, I want to say, I think at some point, we should have like a town hall meeting about ABA, because of what I'm seeing, guys. I mean, there were always people for whom ABA did not resonate, and a lot of them ended up doing floor time. But they were really in the minority of kids that I saw. And I'm not saying kids can't improve with floor time. I'm sure that they do. But the best results that I saw were from ABA treatment providers that had a lot of fidelity with respect to how they assessed kids and then provided the services. And I have seen, amazing results. I'm also really scared about this because I meet parents now that don't understand what the research said, and they don't understand that not all ABA companies are created equal. And so there are common misunderstandings that I'm seeing. I mean, like in dialogue with somebody who has a science and research background, his ABA provider told him he needs only 6 hours a week of ABA. That was something that it never would have occurred to him to second guess. I shared the research with him. He was
did he lose his mind then?
No, and you know what? To his credit, he was open to hearing the information rather than just going into like a defensive, bug curl position because it's so upsetting to be told your kid has been getting a suboptimal program. No, he's following up. But I had a heartfelt exchange with this person, and I said, one of the sadnesses for me is to like get people who say, we did ABA, what's the big deal? And you say, well, what do you mean? And they say, they describe a situation in which someone came into the home a few hours and did parent training, never worked directly with their child. Yeah. So there's, where before we had a small filtering process to go through because it was like CARD and a couple other companies. There's just so many companies out there, and you really have to vet them. And we can talk about how to do that. We don't have to do that now. But
let's have a town hall, though. Let's have a town hall, though.
It's really, really important because when I hear that people are anti-ABA, I mean, this world has to be big enough to allow for a divergence of views, and I don't need anybody to to just lockstep with me because I say that it saved my child's life. But I want to just make sure that if you're of that opinion, that you've had access to really evaluate what a good ABA program would look like. So that's one of the aspects of where we are now, as a country in terms of saving our children's lives with treatment, which, I think I haven't been shy about saying that if your 3-year-old gets a diagnosis of autism, it's not any less urgent than if your child got a diagnosis of leukemia. You got to intervene. You got to intervene aggressively, and you got to stay the course. And I mean, for me, it was easier because there was nothing else to do. There was I went to a few special day classes. They were horrible. They were horrible. I went into my own fetal position and I was like, well, I don't really know about this CARD thing, but God, it's like saying that he might have some degree of independence by kindergarten. So why don't I just try it till kindergarten? And then if it's really not working, I can always go back to a special day class. Of course, in those days, they weren't, the special day classes weren't sort of like, what is it called? Like when you stage your home to sell it, the special day classes are like staged as if they're going to offer you ABA, but all you're going to get if you get a 1-to-1 aid is a para-educator who has, very limited, maybe, 30 hours of online training, 30 hours of training, much of it online and from their district. Okay, so I wasn't even planning on talking about that, but be that as it may, that's one aspect of where we are now. Another aspect of where we are now is we're at the end of the school year. So you aren't going to have to listen to me anymore rant and rave about how you need to have an IEP meeting to talk about what's going to happen in the summer and the fall. The time for that has passed, and we can have specific questions on the air in the future about where you are now with reference to the fall. What exactly does your child's special education universe look like? So where we are now is, I mean, we really do need to step back and celebrate for a moment the fact that Betsy DeVos, in her capacity as a spokesperson for federal government, said no more waivers were necessary, and the district should continue to provide services per people's IEPs. And you know, we didn't lose that, and we're lucky. And she didn't use the opportunity to gut other parts of the IDEA, specifically the attorney's fees provision, which is always confidential, but it does allow people access to the system in a way that they don't have access otherwise. So for summer, like, you know, we can have some ESY questions, we can have some comp ed questions if you're thinking about those things. There were a lot of tips that LRP put out about how to have a successful virtual IEP. And I think it's probably late for those things now. I think almost everybody's done with school. If you, for some reason, have an IEP coming up and you have those questions, we can go over them. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about is after your IEP, whatever type of IEP you're having, if you don't understand what you and the district agreed to at this meeting, or the district's offer in the IEP is confusing, you can ask for prior written notice. And prior written notice, which is codified at 34 CFR 300.503, gives you parents the right to ask the district to provide you with an explanation to questions arising out of your IEP concerning the identification, assessment, and implementation of your IEP. So if you have an offer that's ambiguous, and I had a couple where it's just like, hey, wait, I can't keep up, which thing are you offering? And then I get the IEP and it seems to be at variance with what I recall recording, then I can ask for prior written notice. In other words, I asked you to increase my ABA by 10 hours a week. You said no, you weren't going to do that. I don't understand what your basis is, and I don't understand what research and documents you relied on, and I want prior written notice. And they need to give that to you within a reasonable time. So now is the time basically for you to be reviewing your IEP, making sure that your IEP is in some shape where if school does reopen in the fall, you will be able to have an IEP that is working for you when your child goes back to school, if he or she does in whatever capacity. So, you know, review your IEPs, ask your questions, ask for prior written notice, and then we could take it from there on the show in terms of your questions, because my fear, and what I have been fearing since March 11th, was that there was going to be a huge backlog. There were going to be people that were left in limbo. And that, coupled with the fact that we might be entertaining multiple scenarios in terms of how we would go back to school, whether it's a staggered day, distance learning, some combination of online and in school. I knew that was going to be, varied enough, and maybe ambiguous enough, and maybe not really codified enough that you really, really needed your IEP document to be tight. And you need to understand what's in your distance learning plan too. If you're in LAUSD, they have on their website, they finally got around to posting their policy on what people were going to get for distance learning, depending on what grades you were going to be in. If your district has a similar policy, you might want to take a look at that. Where I left off last time was talking about medically vulnerable students. And in our larger autism family of children that have disabilities, there are oftentimes serious medical considerations. I would say they're secondary to the disability, but they're really not, because they have to be taken as seriously as a disability. So here's what LRP had to say about medically vulnerable students. Plan now to protect medically vulnerable students when school doors reopen. Students who are immunocompromised or have a history of respiratory illness may be at greater risk of either contracting the coronavirus or experiencing severe symptoms. As districts plan to reopen school buildings and resume school activities, IEP and Section 504 teams should give special thought to how they will program for and place students who are medically fragile. While many concerned parents have already brought these issues to the school's attention, schools should not wait for a parent to raise the issue. Schools should be working proactively this summer to identify students whose underlying medical conditions place them at risk. Sorry about the motorcycle outside. Team considerations. IEP and Section 504 teams should reconvene to determine what accommodations a student may need to remain safe and whether the student may require an alternative placement. To properly consider what accommodations a student needs, the IEP or Section 504 team must know what general modifications the school will be putting in place, right, for everybody, so the team can make an informed decision about what additional steps are necessary. Include the student's primary care physician or medical specialist in the discussion. Teams should be ready to succinctly describe the student's medical condition and what modifications are being made to protect the general student population. Then they should ask for more specific recommendations as to what additional measures might be needed to keep the student safe. Identify students who cannot safely learn in school buildings. These students are at too great a risk regardless of what safeguards are in place. They may need to continue learning online, but that decision must be made by the IEP or 504 team on an individualized basis and with a bit of appropriate data. It is crucial that schools obtain this information from the students' medical providers so they can proceed with developing an alternative program in the home or in another appropriate setting. Keep up with the research. Schools will need to be vigilant about keeping up with current research on COVID-19. Some potential accommodations will depend upon emerging information about the virus, such as whether the classroom air filtration might be effective in reducing airborne virus particles. Researchers have more time to study the virus, a better understanding will emerge as to how to effectively minimize the risks at school. Can I keep going or are we out of time?
We're out of time, and I have a question because my concern with what you've just said is that in the current environment that we are in, we've already had a problem with this before we had COVID, that the current medical, it's very hard right now to get a doctor to say that your child is immune compromised because they're afraid of that being misinterpreted because of the vaccine situation. So it is not something that is easy to get right now, to have a medical doctor say that your child is medically fragile where 10 years ago that was easy. And your doctor would just give that to you and say, yes, your child has autism and has had this and this and this. But I hear more and more parents saying, my doctor won't say that for me now.
Well, I think your doctor can say that we're still studying the virus and our understanding of it is growing every week. But until we have a vaccine or our knowledge about this is much more complete, I've been treating the student for 8 years, and I think out of an abundance of caution, given his autism, the best way to proceed would be X, Y, and Z. I don't think you have to use the words immunocompromised if that's a trigger word and it's going to cause problems.
Yeah, I do think it is.
In terms of what else there is left to say on this, there's a discussion about programming considerations, flexibility considerations, and a few other things, and we can take that up on the show next week. But
Okay.
But you guys, the summer is kind of like our time to get on the whiteboard and figure out what the fall is going to look like, and we can work on that on the show. So bring us your questions, and we're all in this together. Nobody feels expert in this. It's uncomfortable. It's hard to fly by the seat of your pants, but we're going to figure it out.
Okay.
We're going to figure it out.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. We so appreciate you taking the time to be here with us. We adore you. Again, Tollner Law Offices, please Google them. Offices in many locations in California. If you are in Southern California and think that you could
or Northern California.
Well, but you can do, but I was going to say in Southern California, and you think you need Bonnie. Now, if you need just somebody, whether it's Northern or Southern, Tollner Law Offices covers pretty much the whole state.
Thank
but
you.
Bonnie's here in Southern California.
But I'm working in Northern California and it's fun.
You are? Okay, yeah. Well, I didn't know that. So if you're in California and you think you need Bonnie, then reach out, Google her at Tollner Law Offices, and you can reach directly out to her. She's pretty fabulous. I know this firsthand.
And you know what? I've got time now, but I'm not going to have time later. So, so reach out. I've got a little lull. Yeah, exactly.
Now is the moment. Okay, thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
I'm going to call you later on today. So thank you.
Lots of love, guys. Stay safe.
Bye. We're going to end the show, but I wanted to go over just a couple of things. Tomorrow on the show, we're having Ifunanya Nweke on, and we are going to take on the conversation of race and different abilities and police. And I know it's going to get difficult, but we need to be talking about it. I also want to say that somebody wrote in and said, my son went to therapy place that held him down to calm him down. And I hated it. It didn't work out well for us at all. And I'm sorry to hear that. There are everybody who walks in a door of an ABA professional is an individual and deserves to be treated like an individual. There are different techniques to prevent somebody from hurting themselves or other people. And in the wrong hands, those can be very scary and detrimental. Please make sure that the ABA provider that you're working with is someone who is reputable and that is looking at you or your child as an individual and is giving the highest quality of ABA, which, to be clear, does not allow for aversives and really works in giving rewards instead of taking things away. That is what my son had the benefit of, and I hope that you all have the ability to have that in your lives because, as Bonnie said, it's life-changing. It's absolutely life-changing. So I thank you, though, for everyone that is here today and all the different opinions that we heard today. They're all always welcome. I want to be clear about that. And the offer stands. If you are someone who's like, well, okay, I want to see this good quality ABA that you're talking about, let me know. I can hook you up. All right. Thank you all for being here. We'll be back tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Okay. Bye-bye.
The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and we are coming to you live from various different places around Los Angeles this morning. Special show today, a little bit different format. We're not gonna start with the jargon. We're gonna do the jargon later on today because we have a guest that we need to get to almost immediately because her time is precious and valuable and she's got other places to be. So I just want to remind you that this show is interactive. We hope that you will participate, especially in today's conversation, because we're going to be talking about some stuff that at some point I imagine it's going to get hard for some or all of us. And that's just what we're here for today, right? Want to encourage you to write in all the different ways that you want to participate. We are live right now on YouTube, Periscope. We are live on Twitter, and we're live on Facebook. And later on, this will be podcast to all of those places, as well as iTunes, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and Spotify, as well as being on our own home website, which is autism-live.com. I'm hurrying because I want to get every minute I can of our guest, who's been very flexible with us. I'm welcoming back to the show Ifunanya, and she's going to tell me if I got it right or wrong, Nweke. It's like a 3-year project I'm working on. Did I say it right?
You said the first name right, the last name, we're still working on it.
Oh man, school me because I want to get it. How do you say the last?
You swallow the N, so it's Ifunanya Nweke. You like swallow the N.
Nweke. Okay, I didn't know that. Yes. I didn't know that. All right, I'm learning. But this amazing young woman, we're so glad to have her. She is a mover and a shaker, and someone who has chosen to be in our autism community and to bring her gifts to our autism community. She's the founder of an amazing organization, Jazz Hands for Autism, but you do a lot of things, and you are a lot of things to a lot of people. And I'm so grateful to have you in my life because of the work that you do, and I mean that sincerely. And because I'm just so grateful that young people like yourself would choose to be in our community. And I know we've talked about this before, and you choose to see that as your gift, that you get to be in the autism community and work with these wonderful people, which just makes my day. I'm just going to be honest about that. You guys had a concert.
Yeah, we had our first
days ago.
concert, May 27th. Sorry, I'm a crier, so if I
cry, look at me, I'm already a mess.
That's
a mess.
We had our first virtual concert May 27th, and to this day I'm just like, wow, I can't believe it actually happened. And for many reasons. The first reason is just going from being fully in person to moving all of our classes online, and then producing an online concert. It was an undertaking. And I just want to just give just big props and big shout outs to our musicians who are just so flexible. Many people think autism is, people with autism are just so rigid and routine, and of course these things exist, but our musicians just went above and beyond. They pushed themselves past their comfort zones to for the concert, to record and re-record until they got a video that they were happy with. And so it was a learning experience for our musicians. It stretched us, all of us, including our musicians. And ultimately the result was wonderful. So I'm so grateful for our musicians, persistence and resilience. I'm so grateful for our team. We have a really wonderful team at Jazz Hands that really supported and supported our musicians in putting that together, and also just putting the whole project together. So yeah, we're very excited. And now musicians can say, I'm a digital musician. Not only am I an in-person musician, but I'm a digital musician. So now they can put that on their resume, that they know how to create videos from home and have it be professional videos. So it was a growing and learning experience for everybody. So I'm just very grateful that we were able to do it. We have another one coming in November. The date is still to be determined, but I'll be announcing that once we have more information.
And if people want to get more information about Jazz Hands for Autism and the classes that you're doing online now, where should they go?
They can just visit our website, which is www.jazzhandsforautism.org. And all of our classes that we offer in person are online, including things like music production, vocal training, everything like that are all online. And then we're also finding ways for us to create opportunities within the digital space for our musicians to perform and to actually find work opportunities. So we've had musicians who've done DJing. We're really capitalizing on our Instagram. We have a really cool project coming out that I can't announce just yet, but once I can, I'll definitely share it. It's a really, really cool project that's going to give our musicians an opportunity to be digital performers and be paid for it, which is our whole goal, is to make sure that not only are our musicians developing these skills, but they can be compensated for their skills and their efforts and their talents. So yeah, just to find out more information about what we're doing, or if you're interested in our programs, just go on our website. We're online until September, and then but we're going to be very cautious with our reopening, because we want to make sure that, you know, our students, our staff, our musicians are all protected, and that we are not, you know, creating a situation where people can get infected.
I appreciate that. And we always have time and room on this show to talk about Jazz Hands for Autism, because it's an amazing thing that you've built. And I feel so fortunate that I remember when you were just starting, and to see what you have built and what you have done has just been so inspirational to me. So we love what you've done, and we always have room to talk about what you're doing here, always.
I also just want to mention that it may seem as if it's a singular operation, but it's not. We have a really amazing team. I'm not gonna cry, but whatever. If I cry, that's fine. Our team is like, they're my favorite people in the world. Our team is just full of just passionate people who go above and beyond to make sure that our musicians are learning. They go above and beyond in suggesting ways that we can be innovative. So it's not just me. Literally, it's a team effort. So Jazz Hands wouldn't be what it is if not for our really amazing team. So I'm really grateful for everybody who is on our staff, our board, and everybody who is just a part of the Jazz Hands family, and the musicians who tell us where they want to go. So it's really,
well, it is an amazing organization, but I gotta say, you know, it all starts at the top, and you have built, and your vision has been felt, and the ripples of your vision have been felt throughout the autism community. So I'm excited that you're, you know, with all the things that have not been well lately, I'm excited for the opportunities that come from being forced to be digital. And I think it's going to broaden what you're doing that much more. And I'm grateful for that. And grateful that you're being cautious about going back to the other. But I got to say that we specifically invited you on today to talk about something else, because we're friends on Facebook, and you had posted something that really hit me right in the middle of the forehead. Well, it did. We've been talking a lot on the show of late about Black Lives Matter. And how important it is that we say that, and that we live that, and that we find a way to not only support and help, but to stop being silently complicit or just being complicit. And that, you know, that starts with each and every one of us. And I have said here that, you know, I need to take that very seriously. And that I feel like, as members of the autism community and as parents and individuals in the autism community, that we need to be taking that very seriously. And you said something on your post. You said, you know, who's ready to talk about and I don't want to put words in your mouth, and maybe you remember exactly what you said, but you said something about, do you want to say what you said? Do you have it there in front of you?
I'm pulling it up because I forgot, but I have it on my Instagram somewhere.
Okay.
I said, we haven't even begun to discuss how police brutality also affects young Black men who have autism, because racism doesn't care about your diagnosis when you're Black. Being Black with a disability is a double whammy when you live in America. Or are we not ready to have that conversation?
And I said, I'm ready to have that conversation. I think we need to have that conversation. And I said, will you come here and talk with us? Because I'm just going to say this. I think, like a lot of people, you know, and I can't help but look in the mirror lately, and like, I don't notice on a regular basis how white I am. Can I be honest about that? Like, I don't look in the mirror and go, oh, look at how white I am. But every day recently, I've been like, oh, look at how white I am. And I need to be cognizant of that. And I just have to be honest. And I feel like a lot of us feel this way. I don't know what to do. I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't know what to do. And I think we have to start having the conversation and be realistic about this. My heart is filled with sorrow and anger and fear, because I have seen this. I have seen this in our autism community before you mentioned it. We all have. Come on. And, you know, I'm going to be honest and say that in my life, because of how white my skin is, I don't get to see as much of it unless it's on the news outside of our community. But I have seen it on the news. I can't pretend that I have not. And we need to do something. But I want to hear from you, and I want you to help us to get our heads wrapped around what it is we need to do, please.
So, wow. You know, I just want to say thank you for, you know, inviting me on the show to discuss this. It's something that is very near and dear to my heart. As you can see, I'm a Black woman. And even though I'm an immigrant, it doesn't matter where I'm still a Black woman in this country. Like when somebody sees me, they you know, they tend to see my skin first. And I have two Black brothers who are very tall. They're both over 6 feet. And so whenever I see on the news, just yet another Black man killed, especially when he's unarmed, or if he is armed, he's carrying his, you know, his license, trying to show you, and you're shooting him, you know, in front of his family. You know, it's just like, will my brother come home today? Will my dad come home today? And I think it's like, it's a very, very emotional topic. And so I'll just start with that, and then I'll address what I think, you know, white people can do to be an ally and to be a part of, you know, dismantling the systematic oppression and systematic racism that exists in this country. So I did a lot of research, so hopefully I don't word vomit. But I just wanted to start out by saying, you know, George Floyd shouldn't be dead. Neither should Breonna Taylor. Neither should Eric Garner. Neither should Tamir Rice, who was 12 years old. Neither should Philando Castile. And the list goes on and on. But the fact remains that they are dead. And why are they dead, and who killed them? You know, they were killed by police officers, individuals paid by our tax dollars to protect and serve. And the question now is like, why were they killed? And I think that is like a very, very nuanced, a very, very deep-seated reason. You know, I have some stats here, you know, some stats that says, you know, according to actually, before I get to that one, it says Black people are 3 times more likely to get killed by the police in the United States by white people. More unarmed Black people are killed by the police last year, and this was in 2015, so in 2014. And that's taking into account that Black people are 14% of the population. And then to top that all off, 99% of the killings by police have not resulted in any charge, in any of them being charged with a crime. So a lot of these crimes are going unpunished. You know, so it's like Black lives and Black bodies are just being disposed of like willy-nilly, you know. And the reason why this is happening is that there's something called I think it's called Black crime implicit bias, where there's an inherent fear of Black people in this country, especially Black men. And so when the police approach them, you know, like Black people or Black men are more likely to be perceived as suspects, or perceived as aggressive, perceived as, assailant than white people, or than white men, you know. And that fact, or that fact, and the probability of that is very, very deep. I can't get into that because we're going to be here for 5 hours, you know.
Right.
But the fact remains is that everybody has implicit biases, and anybody that says that they don't is lying. And in this country, because race is such a racially charged country, there's a lot of implicit racial bias, and a lot of that is at the expense of Black people, especially Black men. And so police, like when police approach a situation, they shoot first before asking any questions. So now just imagine, you know, when it's a young Black man who has autism, and then if you look at the features of autism, you know, there's, you know, challenges in communication, you know, and sometimes these difficulties in communication can manifest in some aggression if they feel misunderstood, or if they feel, you know, a sensory overload, or they're stimming, and, you know, there's difficulty understanding social situations and multi-step directives. So if a police sees a young man and says, who has autism, and says, oh, do X, Y, and Z, and he doesn't understand, and then they shoot, like, you know, there's a heightened danger for young Black men who have autism in this country as it relates to police brutality. Because George Floyd, he could say I can't breathe, and they still didn't care. They still didn't care about whether or not he can breathe. For 8 minutes and 46 seconds, he knelt on his neck.
I know.
Even though he said he can't breathe, he said, "You're killing me." And he can talk. He was able to communicate how he was feeling. Now imagine that's a young Black man who has autism that's nonverbal. Imagine that. So what do? And like, I've read so many stories of like Black mothers who are young Black with Black children who have autism who are just terrified. They're terrified because how do you, even after you explain to your child, if you see a police officer, you do X, Y, and Z. Most black men have gotten that talk from their parents, but yet it doesn't stop the fact that these things keep happening. So I think the onus is not on the Black mothers, it's not on the young Black men who have autism. It's on the system, and so we have to find ways to change the system. And I know there's trainings already that exist, for autism and police officers and things like that. But do those trainings also include implicit bias training? How much training are people getting to explore their implicit bias? Like, I have implicit bias, you have implicit bias, we all have biases about things. And it's until we confront those biases and see how they inform our actions, that we can make a different decision when we are faced with an object or something or stimulus that causes our biases to arise. And so I think a lot of people just don't want to admit that racism exists. Or people just don't want to be called racist. And I get it, but it's like, unless you confront the actual issue, we're never going to get past it, and I was watching many things, and we make it sound as if racism is like this like thing that just floats in on a cloud, just floats in like with ET, like phone home, but that's not what's happening. It's inside. Like, this country is founded upon like pillaging and oppression. And so, do we think that those things are just going to go away? No, it's like deeply embedded, and we have to dig it out. We have to dig it up and look at it and just see that this is what it is. And then we can do something about it. I think it's interesting because I have this thing I call compartmentalization, which, I mean, it's not my thing, but in general, we have this thing where something works we know something works in one area, but we don't see how it works across many areas. So for example, in alcohol, in AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, right? The first step to solving an issue is admitting that you have an issue. So if nobody ever admits that there's an issue, how can we ever solve the issue? And so I think that what to do in order to dismantle these systems, I was talking to my dad yesterday or 2 days ago, and we're talking about like the systemic oppression, the systemic racism. But the thing is that systems consist of people. And we forget that. Like, for example, like an organization, like we want to talk about an organization as if it's if this entity of its own. But an organization is made up of people. The people make up the organization. And so the oppressive systems and the racist systems are made up of people who have racial biases. And so it has to start with it has to start with each individual taking a look within and seeing, okay, what are my biases and how are they showing up in my life, in my work, in my interaction with people? And it's nobody's saying be perfect. Nobody's saying, oh, you can never have any biases. What is being asked is to look at your biases and see how that affects you and how that affects the way you interact with other people. Like, for example, Amy Cooper, who was the lady at Central Park, who called a Black man was telling her to put her dog away in a leash, an area of the park where you have to have your dogs on a leash. And she called the cops and she says, this Black man is, doing X, Y, and Z. So she knew what she was doing. And then later on,
first she threatened, I'm going to call them and
call the cops. She threatened him with police brutality. So it's like, people know that these things exist. Like, it's not like something that, Black people are just like, imagining in their head and just waking up like, oh, wow, this is something that really exists. And even after Amy Cooper did this, oh, hold on a minute, please.
Absolutely. And we've had a couple of comments that have come in too that I want to address before we get too far. Do you need to take that?
Yeah, let's take that. Let's take that.
Okay, so, and it was sort of at the beginning when you were talking and somebody wrote in, and I think your question was probably answered, but I do want to address it. Somebody said, is this about autism? And I want to make sure that everybody realizes that it absolutely is about autism, because this is the world in which we are giving our children and asking the world to take them in and for them to take the world in. So on a very basic level, whatever the world is struggling with, our kids are going to struggle with ×8, maybe ×100, depending on, what the difficulty is and what our child's abilities are, or what our abilities are, for those of you who are watching who are on the spectrum. So it absolutely is about autism. And we don't have to go far to see exactly what Ifunanya is talking about. I mean, we covered extensively the situation of the autism therapist who was working with a person with autism in the parking lot, and despite identifying himself as someone who was working with a child, ended up being shot by the police, although he was completely unarmed. We don't have to go far to look for these examples and see that this is happening to individuals who are on the autism spectrum and they don't have the ability to communicate.
Right.
And I also, but I also want to point out, somebody else wrote in and said that I have to say that discrimination doesn't affect only African-American people. It happens daily in different ways to Spanish people as well. And they are not the only ones. Let's be very honest that there are different groups that have been oppressed in lots of different ways. Nobody is trying to minimize that. And I want to make sure that everybody understands that that's not what's happening here. But we have a horrible epidemic of individuals who are and whatever words you want to use, they used African-American, whether you want to say Black, African-American, whether you want to say that it's people of color or brown or whatever. We are seeing that the police, as you've said, that there are biases, that when the situation starts, before anything else happens, in ABA parlance, we have establishing operations that are affecting what happens. And that you can talk about everything else that's happening, but that thing is there first before anyone does anything. And that's what we have to acknowledge and what we have to work on as individuals.
I agree. And the thing is that, so I actually have a couple more stats. So
yeah, go for it.
Advocacy group Autism Unites, people with autism spectrum disorders are 7 times more likely to interact with police over their lifetime compared with people without a cognitive disorder, right? And then I have a quote from a mother of a young Black man who has autism. And she says, he's Black, male, and autistic, she says. I never know if he'll be accosted. You ask questions later and you shoot first. It's happened too many times all over this nation. And so the question is it about autism? Yes, I mean, yes, it is, because there are young Black men who have autism. And if these implicit biases exist within the police officers who are going to be approaching them, then that is the first way that they're interacting, is the color of their skin. And then questions are asked later. If they see a young Black man who maybe can't necessarily communicate, maybe he's nonverbal, maybe he's stimming, or maybe he's overstimulated and something's happening, and maybe he's flapping his arms, and the police officers don't know what's going on. If they have that implicit racial bias, they're going to approach that situation as, oh, this man is likely an assailant. He's likely a suspect of something, as opposed to he's a victim or he's having a hard time. And so I think it's important that we look at it that way. I'm not saying that Black people are the only people that have been oppressed, or that have been that are discriminated against. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, like, I'm focusing right now on Black people, but that's not excluding everybody else on other groups who have been oppressed or discriminated against. But I am focusing on specifically right now on young Black men who have autism.
Yes, and that is a reality. Yeah. That is an absolute reality, and we as a community have a responsibility to talk about this. It gets sticky, it gets uncomfortable. Like, it's not how we want to spend our Tuesday morning. It's not how anybody wants to spend our Tuesday morning. But one of the things that was most emotional to me is the picture of the mom on the street corner handing the sign saying, when George Floyd called out for his mom, he was calling to every single mom that there is. And I just want to say that as moms of young men, children on the spectrum, young men, not young men. We have a responsibility to hear that. And we have to acknowledge, my son is on the spectrum and I worry about him interacting with the police, but let me be abundantly clear. I know that my son can walk down the street, and if he were stopped by the police, it would be a different interaction than if my son were Black. That's just a fact. And that fact is borne out by data. That is just a fact. And I can't be okay with that. I don't know how anybody can be okay with that. It's not right. But again, I go back to, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do.
So speaking of, knowing what to do, I do have some solutions that I've been kind of thinking up, and they're not necessarily novel solutions, but I think it's just like maybe a novel interaction of different solutions. So like I mentioned earlier, there are some autism focused law enforcement trainings. But I'm curious to know if any of these trainings also take into account implicit bias training. I think that could be one way that we infuse that, right? There's also this big move to defund the police, and I think it's a very misunderstood move. It's not saying get rid of police officers. It's saying some police officers have taking over. There's too much responsibility on police officers. They're handling mental health situation, mental health crises, and etc. So instead of doing that, let's put some of the funding that we put into the police into other entities and other community based,
like social workers, yes,
I think just other professionals that can respond to different things in our community as opposed to law enforcement. And just to add one more stat, right? So there's an article that I read. Former police officer Seth Stoughton, he's now a professor at the University of South Carolina. Police, like the way that police are trained, there's 60 hours of use of deadly force in police training, right? And then just over 60 hours of self-defense. However, there are only 8 hours of training of de-escalation and resolution training in police training.
Yeah.
So a bulk of the time is spent on training police officers how to be, essentially just militarizing police officers, how to protect themselves and how to use deadly force. Although their slogan is to protect and serve. So if all you're worried about is just protecting yourself and use of deadly force, then at what point are you worried about protecting whoever you're attending to? So I think that we need to find ways to reform the police training. There needs to be a lot more focus on de-escalation, and that de-escalation is not gonna just work for the autism community, but just across the board. Because it allows you to ask questions before you pull your weapon. So just more de-escalation training. In fact, there probably should be more training on de-escalation techniques and tactics than there is on use of deadly force. And then once again, having some kind of implicit bias training or implicit bias evaluation done before becoming a police officer, because that's in the same way that of course it's not necessarily all the way parallel, but in the same way that doctors spent almost a decade learning their how to do their job because it's a life or death situation. Police officers are also in a life or death situation type of job, and so there needs to be a lot more time, a lot more training, a lot more weeding out of people, and it needs to be a lot harder to become a cop. And so that by the time you get to the end of that journey, you are well equipped to not always just engage your fight or flight response, and to be afraid and to react out of fear, because you can't do that as a police officer because your reaction from fear can kill somebody. So I think there needs to be a lot more training on just like self-awareness training, implicit bias training, a lot more de-escalation training within the police training. And then just in general, I think I would just urge everybody to just ask themselves questions about their motivations and their intentions when they do things, and that's going to reveal to you the areas of your biases. And once you're aware of that, you can then make a different decision on how you approach situations and how you allow your biases to affect or color your interactions with people.
Somebody has written in and said, my son was cuffed and had guns on him just because he had a meltdown. This was in Lake Worth, Florida in 1997. And here on Autism Live, we read stories, unfortunately, close to every week where there are interactions with the police where it's an individual on the autism spectrum, and a lot of times it doesn't end well. It doesn't end well, and I have to say, that it is a lot of the times it's every color in the rainbow, right? So this is. But I would bet that if we were to do a stat chart on it, we would see that, an individual, just like matching the real world, if your skin is darker, your outcome is likely to be darker, and that is not okay. But on a very, on a very simple basis, I think we all need to say that what we're doing isn't working, and that we got to look at different ways. And I can't speak to the rest of the world, but, oh, did I lose you, Ifunanya? There you are. Okay, I got to say that, it's very clear that statistics have been in for quite a while that what we're doing is not working. We have real problems on the street that do not require, it's like having a thread that's pulled on your pants and trying to take a hammer to take care of it, right? We have people that have, we know that there's homeless people on the street that have some diagnosable mental illness. We know that there are people who have learning disabilities that are on the street. We know that there are people who have drug issues. We don't need to take a hammer to take care of that problem. And guess what? We've tried that. It's not working. It's not helping the situation, and people are dying, and predominantly those are people of color. If we aren't willing to look at it, our kids are a part of that equation. Yeah. And we have, as a community, I feel that we have to face this. Somebody said, yes, more training is needed, and they need to meet more autistic people before they are called out. Yes, I mean, I think that that's a part of it, and we've told our families, we have to take responsibility, talk to our children, take them to the police department, have them meet the folks there. But for some people, that in and of itself is traumatic.
Yeah, it's terrifying. Like kind of going back to most of my Black friends who are men who don't have autism, they're afraid of the police. Seeing a police officer is not a welcome sight because it's
right.
Because there's profiling, there's this and there's that, and so taking your child to a police station it's terrifying. But once again, I think it's important to say that I think parents should train, do their best, to prepare their children who have autism, with, encounters with the police, using social stories and things like that. Visuals are really helpful, which I'm sure you guys already know. But I think it's important to mention that the onus is not on the families.
That's right.
It's not on the families. It's not on the individual, who has autism. It's on the individuals who are in the system. It's on the police officers. It's on the system to change. The system has to change. Not the individual shouldn't change because our tax dollars are funding the system. So it's like we're paying for this. So the system should change. We shouldn't change. And so I think it's important to mention that while I know I do think it's important as a parent to do your due diligence in training your son or daughter who has autism in interact with the police and just and I think the most important the largest effort should be placed on ensuring that police officers know how to properly de-escalate a situation, because that's their job. Their job is to de-escalate situations. It's to protect and serve. How do you protect and serve somebody with deadly force? You cannot do that. That's not protecting. That's assailing. You're the assailant in that situation. So I think it's important that police officers are taught how to properly de-escalate a situation and to have training that spans across many different intersectionalities, not just race, but also ability/disability, and etc. They need to have experience and training on how to de-escalate a situation that involves a person with that's having a mental health challenge, or better yet, let's just get somebody else who's better tasked at that instead of having the police officer come and do that.
Yes. We have other people who are better trained for that. And I think, that is the part of the argument that isn't, people are trying to highlight it, but it seems to be lost in words are so important, and
Right.
words matter, and across the board. And a lot of people are misunderstanding when they say defund the police, that the fear that I'm hearing from people about lawlessness, and that the police will be gone. That's not what anybody is saying. The suggestion is that we better serve the population that we have, and that we not use a hammer when we need a thread and needle.
Right.
And that we all need to get better training. I do agree with you that I'm always trying to give parents something that they can hold on to, that they can do, but that hasn't worked. Like, we've been telling parents for 8 years, take your kids to the police department, teach your kids, show them, it hasn't worked in terms of it's not changing on the other side. And I don't think anything is going to change unless enough of us say enough.
Right, exactly. So yeah, so I think, like, for parents, using social stories, if you want to do something at home, using some kind of social story, I do think it's important to talk to your kids about race, whether or not you think that they are able to, fully comprehend that in that moment. But I think it's important for them to understand that, understand how, like, the social landscape, because that is a part of social skills. But I think that, once again, as you do your part as a parent, I just want to make it clear that the onus is on law enforcement to respond appropriately and respond better, to learn how to de-escalate, increase the de-escalation training, and add a very, very large serving of implicit bias training and implicit bias evaluation. Those things are very, very important in making sure that the system actually changes. Because if we don't do any of these things, the system will remain the same, and will continue to have the same outcomes. And then, once again, let's find ways to invest into other resources that are better suited for responding to different things in our community, as opposed to just having law enforcement respond to everything. Because I don't think that I don't think that is necessarily their domain. There's they have too much jurisdiction over things that are not their expertise or their specialty. So I think that we need to bring in more people into our communities that have a specialty in these different areas. So, for things that are mental health related, get somebody who's in the mental health community. For things that are, different, find different professionals, because they exist. People go to school for these things, and they have deep expertise in these things. So let's pull them into our communities and have them be the ones that are providing the solutions to those areas, as opposed to just having law enforcement or police officers doing everything across the board.
Absolutely. And I think one of the big misunderstandings is about the implicit bias.
Yeah.
That I think we all like to think, well, that's not me.
Yeah.
I'm not racist, and I don't feel that way. And so I don't take ownership of that. And there was a woman in the 80s, I wish I could remember what her name was, who would go around. She was a little white woman. I'm just going to say that, but she would go around and she would do these classes at businesses. And I can't remember whether, this is how old I am. I can't remember whether she was.
You're not 20 years old? I don't believe you.
Or whether it might've been on Oprah, but she had a room full of people, every color in the rainbow. And she was saying to all of them, do any of you think that you're racist? And of course they were like, no. No, not at all. We're not at all. And so she said, reach underneath your chair. It was something along this line. And everybody had a box of Crayola crayons. And she said, I would like for you to reach into the box, and I would like you to take out the crayon that is named flesh. And everybody took out the crayon, and everybody had a light bulb moment. Now, Crayola has since changed, and they, there was this color that was like this, I think now it's called peach, right? But that was the color that Crayola, and it was in every single school around the world, that this is the color of flesh.
Yeah.
And we all didn't notice it. And honestly, recently, Crayola came out with a box of crayons that it's calling the colors of the world, that are its flesh colors. And I think that that's a real shift in the way that we look at things. But I just want you to think about how insidious that little thing was that I grew up with and I didn't notice, and I would not have said, okay, there's implicit bias, but
Yeah.
that's just one example.
And
Jane Elliott, Traven is saying that the woman's name was. Look her
yeah,
up.
yes, I know. She wears, I think she wears glasses.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I think that I forget what I was watching something or I was reading something. It's been a lot of things that, I've been consuming a lot of information, but essentially it's impossible. Like, every day, like we grow up, in psychology, there's priming, like, there's like, we literally grow up with messages about different things in our lives every day. And so it's impossible to think that we have not, what's the word, internalized any of those things.
Yes.
And so, and I think it's important that we remain humble, and remain teachable. And once when we have that heart position, then it won't be hard for us to see, where our implicit biases lie. Everybody has implicit bias. They're not all racially charged, but they're all implicit and they're all biases, And so I think that it's important that we, once again, like what I try to do is, and I'm not perfect, there's times I'm like, oh, that was a bias. I do something, I'm like, oh yeah, let's work on that. Let's explore why I feel that way about that thing. But I think asking ourselves questions about stuff, asking ourselves questions about, why did I react that way? Why does that bother me? Why do I feel afraid right now? Just things like that. Like when your body's giving you, like, all your feelings and your emotions are cues and clues for you to discover more about, the way that you're built. And so I think that, asking ourselves questions about our intentions and our motivations is going to be a very, very important tool. I think it's important that we all do that. Everything, like, like if somebody walks by and I do this, I'm like, okay, why did I just do this? Was this person actually really threatening to me, or was it just like, was I just assuming something because I watched something on TV many years ago and it indicates to me that this person I should be afraid of this person. And so I think just, asking ourselves why, remaining humble and remaining teachable, I think is going to be very, very important. And I also want to say, I mean, I'm not an expert at this, but children watch, I don't have any kids of my own, but I can't wait, children watch us, and, there's something called priming. Once again, in psychology, we don't know that we're learning things, but we're learning things. So children are watching us. So the way that we respond to things, as human beings, as parents, not that I'm a parent, but as parents, your children are absorbing those without even knowing that they're absorbing those interactions and those ideologies. So I think just remaining curious, remaining humble, remaining teachable, I think is going to be very, very important in us begin to uncover our implicit bias and not to be afraid of claiming that you have a bias and just like, don't be afraid of that. Like once again, nobody's perfect, no one. And so for us to think that we are is, I think that's crazy. Nobody's perfect, no one. And so if we know that we're not perfect, then that means every day is an opportunity for us to learn and to be taught something new about ourselves. And so remaining curious, not if somebody says something that they receive from you, don't immediately say, oh no, that's not me. Inquire why. I wonder why this person received that from me. I wonder why this person felt this way about what I did. And at the end of your curiosity about that, you may say, well, it may just be a them thing, right? It may just be a them thing. Or you may discover, wow, a lot of it is a them thing, but I can see how they would perceive this from me, and what can I do with this information that I have? So I think, just being teachable, being humble, and just knowing that nobody's perfect, and knowing that, and just, having a learning spirit, I think is going to be very important in us just really uncovering it, so, for, if there are, individuals out there, white people who are out there that want to know how to do, and not just white people, really everybody, Black people, Latinx people, everybody can be more curious about themselves, about their motivations, about their intention. In ABA, we know that behaviors, there's a function for every behavior. We know this within the autism community. That doesn't just exist in autism community. Let's not compartmentalize that. That is across the board. There's a function for every behavior, even if you're not on the autism spectrum. So in the same way that you approach that, approach your kids with that, who may have autism, approach yourself with that. Like, what's the function for my behavior?
Yes. Taking us to church. Thank you. I know that unfortunately we got to let you go because you got a meeting that you got to go to.
I see my meeting already started. But...
I'm sorry. And can I just tell you how much I adore you and respect you? And I'm so glad that you said what you said on Facebook and then were willing to come on here and talk about it. Please, you guys, check out Jazz Hands for Autism. This is an amazing woman doing amazing things, and you're a leader. And I'm so glad that we had this opportunity to talk with you. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
know I want to try to be better. I want to be more humble. I want to be more open. I want to be more teachable. So thank you for giving us that.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for this opportunity. I thank you for everybody who commented. I'm just so appreciative of your varied opinions and your input. Thank you for participating and engaging in this conversation. And I think it's a conversation that we need to have more of, even if it's not here. Have it in your family, have it in your home, whatever it may be. I think we need to have these hard conversations and not be afraid to be wrong and to be teachable and to learn. So I really appreciate this time, and I pray that we all continue to be teachable and humble, myself included. I learn something about myself every day. And so I pray that we all have that experience of learning something new about ourselves every day in ways that we can improve and move forward better and more improved. So I really appreciate this time, and, many blessings. And
As well.
I pray that, our country sees, more progress, more humility, and just more equity and equality for everybody.
Amen. Thank you so much. You have a great day. Okay. We'll be in
Have a
touch
blessed
soon.
day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
That was the amazing Ifunanya Nweke. Hopefully I said that right. Okay, we said that we were going to do jargon a little bit later on if we had time, and we do have time. And I just want to say before we get into that, I thank you guys for hanging. I know it's uncomfortable, and I know that feelings come up, and I love that she was saying to us, we need to talk to ourselves and say, why am I feeling that way? Why does this bother me? Why is this, what is it about this that is scary to me? Or what is it about this that feels, whatever it is. And we can start there. We can absolutely start there, because for our kids' sake and our society case, we got to start somewhere, right? Okay, but it is time for jargon of the day. This is where we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym. We try to figure out what are the experts talking about. We give you the actual definition. I try to make fun of the actual definition because, really, what else can you do? And then we give you a working definition that's a little less specific, but hopefully it'll help you. And it's sneaky today because our jargon term for today is receptive language, and you'll see why it's sneaky. So let's take a look. You probably have heard this term. Especially if you have anyone that you love in your family that's on the spectrum, and you're talking to people at school, they talk a lot about expressive language and receptive language. So what's the difference? What's receptive language? Because this is something that we all need to strengthen, especially in these times. Let's take a look at our actual definition. Receptive language is the process of attending to communication, spoken or non-vocal, comprehending the communication, and being able to react appropriately within a specific time parameter, even when what is being conveyed contains multiple facets. Okay, as definitions go, it's not the worst. It's a little wordy, and it doesn't really get down easily to what we're talking about. Although, Trayvon, I'm going to want to come back to this, but let's go to the working definition of receptive language. It's the child or an individual's ability to understand what is being said to them. But just understand that what's being said to you is said to you on a lot of different planes. Receptive means this, what we're open to, what we, hear, what we take in, right? So, for instance, let's say that the teacher is at the front of the classroom and she does this, she raises the stink eye eyebrow and goes to one of the students. Now, hopefully the student would be someone who can understand, okay, I was just doing what I was doing. I looked up and the teacher was looking at me that way. What does that mean? That means that she's unhappy with what I'm doing and I should stop, right? But not every child, not every individual will be able to read the facial expressions to understand what's going on. But that is a part of receptive language. If the teacher points at the person and goes like that, understanding, I'm talking to you and I want you to go over there and I'm not happy, because I could have been like, pointing at you and going like that, right? But I didn't. I pointed and I went, right? And my face was doing something, and all together, you know, I was sending the, I'm disapproving of what you're doing and you better get over there because I'm not happy, right? That's receptive language too, just as clearly as if I said to somebody, stop what you're doing and get over there, right? So receptive language is the ability to listen with all of your senses and to take in information in a time parameter in which you can react that we're going to call an appropriate, I don't want to say normal because there's nothing normal about it, but an appropriate amount of time. So what we see sometimes is that some kiddos have receptive language that they can take it in, but it's like on a tape delay. So the teacher will go, right? And the student doesn't go immediately. They got to think it through. And they're like, okay, was she pointing at me? What is it that she wants me to do? Why is her face that way? And the time that it amounts to them figuring it out, the teacher already wanted it to happen. So now the situation escalates. You see what I'm saying? Because the teacher is like, now you're being disobedient too. So for those kiddos, we just want to sharpen up the amount of time that it takes for them to process, right? But there are other kiddos that receptive language is not their strong suit. And it might be that they take in the vocal instructions and they hear it and they react well, or it could be that they don't respond to vocal instructions, right? That it's better to hold up a picture, that their body processes that quicker. There are some kids that are not good at facial expressions, right? So there's lots of different types of receptive language, but I want us to start with ourselves right now. Think about, you know, where are your receptive language strengths and where are your weaknesses? I am horrible at hand signals. Oh my gosh, it gives me so much anxiety when I pull up to a traffic stop and there is somebody who's directing traffic, whether it's in a parking lot of a baseball stadium, and it's, you know, it's like a person who's had 2 days training, or whether it's like, you know, there's really amazing traffic cops that have the whistles and they do whatever. Total anxiety because I have no idea what they're saying to me. Me going to Disneyland and getting parked, we usually have my husband drive into the parking lot because there's somebody there going like this. And I end up having to pull up, roll my window down and go, what does that mean? There are 3 different directions here and you're going like this. Which direction do you want me to go? I just can't figure it out. It's not my strong suit. I don't know why, but it's not the thing I'm good at. Whereas, you know, if somebody says to me, now listen, you want to go down here and you want to turn to the left and then you want to go to the right and then you want to go past the tree and go to the left and then you want to go to the right when you get to the blue house, right? Now that, if I'm paying attention, I can follow. Whereas other people go, you lost me at the first tree. So where are your receptive language strengths? When are you good at listening? When are you not good at listening? I also know that for me, I don't know whether it's, you know, other things, but I have sensory issues. And if you give me something to hold on to, I can listen better. I just can. And I learned that my son was that way too. That if I gave him something to hold on to, you could read to him and he could hear. But if you take the thing away, he needed something to do, right? And I'm exactly that way. And my mother was that way too. But other people, it's the exact opposite. If you're trying to talk to them and they're holding something, forget it. It's like it diminishes their ability to hear. So understanding receptive language first within ourselves and knowing like, oh, where am I good with receptive language? And in general, you know, we have expressive language, which is the ability to talk, and receptive language, which is the ability to take in. And I gotta say, you know, it's not going to come as a shock to you that my expressive language is better than my receptive language. But what about you? Which one is stronger for you? And then you want to think about which one is stronger for your child. And it's not unusual for a child on the spectrum to have very little receptive or expressive language and for one of them to jump up before the other. And I got to say that my son's receptive language jumped up well before his expressive, but then his expressive passed his receptive. So he's much more like me now, that expressive is his strong suit. And he's learning to take in still facial. Look, I'm learning to take in facial expressions and to imply from them after looking at the whole situation what they might mean. So all of us right now could be working on our receptive language. As I watch the news at night when I can, I think, oh, we all need to do more perspective taking, and we all need to work on our receptive language. We need to read the cues. We need to see what's happening and listen, right? Okay, moving on. We always have a question of the day, and our question for you today is, what is your favorite sound? What is the thing that you hear and, gives you peace or happiness? Or obviously, I love to hear my son laugh. Oh my gosh, there's just really nothing better than that, right? And I would tell you that one of my son's favorite sounds is when I laugh so hard that I can't breathe. He loves that, I know, because he's doing that thing. Mom's laughing, and he'll run into the room to hear what was it that made you laugh that way. But there are certain guitar sounds that I just absolutely love. Different musical instruments that I love, and some that I don't love that aren't my favorite. But what's your favorite sound? We all need to be taking care of ourselves, even though, we've talked about so much that's anxiety provoking. Everybody needs to be soothing ourselves in ways that are positive, and sound is really a great way. I urge you guys to listen to some music today. And our topic this week on the show here is, what are you focused on? Now, today we took some time and we focused on something that I think needs to be focused on, that we have a responsibility, especially in the autism community, to focus on this and to be a part of the solution. And to be mindful that we are a part of this and that we need to find the solution. I think that that's super important, and you can disagree with me, right? But what are we focused on in general? And I got to say, the reason why I think it's important to us is that if we are not inclusive as a community, if we are not about justice and about justice for all, if we do not say to the world, it is important to look at more than the color of someone's skin, the more important to look at someone for more than just their outward ability, then it will be to the detriment of our community. It will absolutely be to the detriment of our community. We have an opportunity, we have a voice, we need to speak up for our community. And our community is hurting. Let's be honest. So, I want you to consider what you're focusing on right now. I hope that there's something positive that you have going on, that's something in the future. I shared many weeks ago, I showed you guys, like, you can garden in your windowsill. And then eventually I went out and dug up a part of our lawn and said, I have to plant something. And it was a spiritual need of mine that I needed to plant something, because when I saw that we were in this for a period of time, that is what I have done in the past when something is hard, and it's going to take a lot of time, and I'm impatient and I don't want to wait, is that I plant something, because there's nothing like planting something and with a hope and a wish and going, I'm putting this seed in the ground where I can no longer see it, and I'm going to pour water on it, and then I'm going to see what happens. And, when I got to be honest with you, 7 days later after I planted the garden, and, it was a really long 7 days, because I was like, I don't know that anything's going to come up. I paid for good seeds, but I don't know what's going to come up. And that's life, right? And then when stuff started breaking through, it was like, look at that. And now my garden is in that sort of wonky stage where it's all green and lush and everything, but there's nothing productive. And now is a moment when I have to take particular care to see that things, the time and the effort, that things come to fruition. And this is all a metaphor for me of life and dealing with hard things, and to see, I see my little bean vines, and they twirl to try to find something to grab onto. And I feel that way right now. I feel like let's grab onto each other. Let's grab on and let's grow. But it takes time. But to see my garden 5 weeks later, it is a life affirming thing to me to see that, yes, you can plant seeds, and if you water them, things come up, and it changes the face of the earth. And it can nourish you, and it can nourish the ground, and it can provide shelter. And it's amazing what's possible. And we are just like those plants, and we can invest in ourselves. You can plant a seed today. What is the seed that you want to plant? And then you got to water it, and you got to tend it, and you got to see, I got one plant that's like looking like it might have some sort of disease or something. I'm going to have to look at that, right? But let's do something positive today. Be nice to yourselves, be nice to each other. We're going to be back tomorrow. And hey, tomorrow we have Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh back, and that's going to be wonderful. We haven't had her for weeks, and you guys can be writing in your questions right now for her. It's going to be a great week. I didn't say this, maybe I did say this before, that on Thursday, we're going to replay the Temple Grandin episode that we did a week ago with Temple, where she was talking about finding and feeding our kids' passions. We're going to replay that episode on Thursday. And on Friday, we're going to replay last Friday's Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy, with myself, Nancy Oswald Jackson, and Matt and Nava Paskowitz Asner. We're going to replay that. And I'm taking a couple of days off. I know it's just not like me in this, but I need to be helping to put together the memorial for Joanne Lara, which we're going to tell you more about, because we're going to be hosting it. And it's a week from Saturday. And so I need to put together some things, and I need some time to do that. You know what I'm saying? But we're going to be back strong next week, all week. And I just appreciate you guys so much. I know it's a tough time, but I appreciate you being here with me. We hold hands. We get through this together. Yeah. I will see you tomorrow with Dr. Granpeesheh. Keep the good thought. Give your kiddos a hug from me, and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.
The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
It nice if I unmuted myself. It's that kind of a day. So sorry.
Good morning, Shannon.
Good morning. I was saying good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and I'm here with the fabulous Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, and she is currently on her phone, but at some point we might be able to get her on a different device. But we're just thrilled and happy to have her here with us, because she's an amazing. And she is, we have lots of experts on the show, but I gotta say, and I don't mean to make anybody else feel bad, but she's the most wonderful. So there we go.
So kind. Thank you, Shannon.
No, it's true. And she's been working in this field for many, many, many years, many more than anybody would believe to look at her, because you look like you're 18 right now.
Oh my God. Yeah.
You do.
Thank you.
You do. But she's been working in this field for a very long time, helping individuals on the autism spectrum and helping their families to better help them. And so she's a wealth of knowledge, and she joins us when she can on Wednesdays. We haven't had her for the last couple of weeks, so it's a big treat for us to have her back. Welcome back, Dr. Granpeesheh.
Oh, thank you so much, Shannon. It's nice to be back, and I apologize for not being here the last few weeks.
Oh, we understand you are a busy person with a lot of things to do and a lot of people to help. We're just grateful for when we have you. So, and thrilled to have you back. I do want to say to folks that there are lots of ways to connect with us. I know that many of you are just tuning in and watching us for the first time. And this show, our motto here is that we're here to give you information and inspiration to try to help you to get to whatever next level you're trying to get to. And this show is for the larger autism community. So that starts with individuals who are on the spectrum, of course, and then it includes everyone who loves them. All the people who care about them, the spouses, the brothers, the sisters, the moms, the dads, the grandparents, the aunts, the uncles, the teachers, the therapists, everybody who cares about somebody who's on the autism spectrum. We welcome all of you to this conversation about how we can get to real progress that is meaningful to those individuals so that they are treated with the respect and the dignity and get the jobs and the housing and all the things that they so richly deserve. So, and during this hour, we're going to be live and interactive, and there are lots of ways to connect with us. You can be watching us live right now on our homepage, autism-live.com, but you can also be watching us on YouTube, on Periscope, on Facebook Live, and Twitter. We're live on Twitter. How could I forget Twitter? And then later we will podcast. It will still be available in all those places, but later we will podcast as a free podcast to download on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Deezer. So if there's a place that you would like us to be, our sort of criteria is that we want to be someplace that's free to people where they can watch this at their leisure, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Don't forget that many people write in and say to us, I wish that it was available as just an audio podcast so that I could take you in the car or on a walk. You absolutely can. I just want to point out that on most of the places that we podcast, you can get just the audio. And the great thing about iTunes is you can choose. Do you want audio only, or do you want picture and sound? So Dr. Granpeesheh, we're going to be asking her some questions, and now we've got two of you now. It's exciting.
Oh, that's wonderful.
There we go.
If you have two of me, then I can always turn one off, but
yeah, that's wonderful.
I can't see you in either one. So,
oh dear. Well, now all I'm seeing is your phone. There we go. So Dr. Granpeesheh is here for this hour to answer questions from you wherever you are in the world. We have a couple that I cherry picked from the last 48 hours, but you guys can be writing in on all those features that we were telling you about. In fact, on autism-live.com, you can write in for, and it's completely anonymous. There's a chat button at the bottom, write in. It comes in right here on this iPad that I have right here so that I can see it in almost real time. But I do encourage people to write in early. I know what happens is that we get on a roll, and then I always get when it's about 40 minutes into the hour, because there's a bunch of questions and I go, oh no, we're not going to get them all in. And I always feel bad about that. So try to write in as early as you can. Now, Dr. Granpeesheh, and she's going to answer your questions in a general manner, because even though she's an amazing expert, there is no expert in any field that could answer individual specific questions in this format, because she doesn't have eyes on the situation. It's as simple as that. And to act as though she could would be disrespectful to those individuals. But she's going to answer your questions in a general nature to help you to be able to go back to the experts that have eyes on the situation and maybe be a little bit better informed and know what to start by asking. So there we go. We had somebody who wrote in, and I believe people are already saying hello, hello, hello. Okay, so somebody wrote in, and I think it's the same person. So I sent you some of the questions, Dr. Granpeesheh. I'm gonna skip down to the second part, but I believe that the first two are the same person. Hello, ma'am. My son is going to be 7 years old in August. He was diagnosed with developmental delays at age of 1.5. He's not walking, but we can make him stand with the support of the bed, and then he manages for a few minutes. He doesn't respond to his name, but sometimes he reacts to different things. He is not speaking, but says a few words as baba, mama, papa, that too, and continuing. But he plays on the floor, rolling, standing till knees, then with keeping his legs upwards and lying down. If you put him in a walker, he goes backwards sometimes. He always puts his hands in his mouth and plays with his clothes on the face and starts laughing and enjoying. Is there any exercise, or how can we help him to learn to walk and talk and all the different things? Please do help, is what they're asking.
That's wonderful. Can you hear me okay, Shannon?
Yeah, I can hear you. I think we're on just a little bit of a delay, but I can hear you fine.
Okay, great. So I feel really bad for this family. My goodness, what they must be going through with the child at 7. I'm wondering if they're in the US, or if we know where the question is coming from, because I really think this is a serious enough case where you should have professional help. You should possibly have some physical therapy, occupational therapy, and then of course you can add to that yourself, and you can do a lot of work yourself. But I really feel like, you know, your child, if he is on a walker and able to move backwards, then possibly with a lot of physical and occupational therapy, he might actually be able to walk, which I think is very important. And then, of course, all the other skills that you need to teach. If he is already saying some sounds, then language becomes very important. I would ask, how is he communicating his needs right now? How is he letting you know what he wants or doesn't want? It becomes very, very important. If you are not in the US, or even if you are in the US and you need, you can't get professional help right now, I really recommend that you go on our skills website, skillsforautism.com. That you'll find a lot of lessons there. There's a section for motor skills. There's also a section for language. It'll tell you some of the things that you need to teach, and step by step how to proceed with teaching both mobility and language. And then, of course, you can also use our IBT website, which is Institute for Behavioral Training, where you'll learn some of the ABA techniques. But I really think initially it would be wonderful if you were able to connect with a physical therapist or occupational therapist and work on some motor skills. Gross motor, fine motor, all of those types of skills are very important. And they will actually help oral motor, which will then be necessary for language.
And this parent, they reached out in 2 different ways, which I encourage people to reach out to us, you know, and that's why I think that it's the same parent. So they also emailed me. So I'll be able to email this clip back to her in case she's not watching right now, and maybe we can help to connect her to more things. I don't believe that they are in the United States, and that makes it harder in some cases, depends on where you are. But I just want to say that no matter who you are, no matter where you are, there is always progress that can be made. And I want to say that for a very specific reason, because sometimes we're told that our kids have fill in the blank, and that's the end of the story, period, full stop, end of the story. And it never is. It never is. Everyone has the ability to grow and to learn at different rates and to different ends. but progress can always be made. It might mean picking what you want to make progress on and focusing on that and having it take a long time, but progress is always available for all of us and for all of our kids. And that makes my heart feel better. You know what I mean, Dr. Granpeesheh?
100%, absolutely. Any progress gives us, more hope, and then of course, the more hope we have, the more harder we work, and all of our kids make progress. So it's just about finding the right ways.
Wonderful. So we've got a bunch of people who have written in, and I want to say hello to a bunch of people. Emma, we're saying hello to you. Rosangala, Bonnie, and Lauren, and Lourdes, and I want to. So somebody has asked the question: is repeating yourself part of autism?
Yes, it could be. I don't know the exact circumstances, but there is one of the symptoms of autism is what we call echolalia. And this is when a child hears something and they just repeat it. Sometimes you'll see it in the form of repeating sounds, like e, like that, or sometimes you'll see it in the form of repeating full sentences, even that the child heard on, let's say, TV or a commercial or somewhere. So it could be echolalia, and it's not necessarily a bad thing either. We are actually pretty encouraged when a child has echolalia because it shows that the child can develop speech. So if you are concerned if your child is doing that, then I would recommend that you see a specialist. Anyone who works in the field of autism, preferably someone who is a diagnostician, they can very easily tell you if this is echolalia and if it's a symptom of autism, and they can help you down the path.
And I've gotten some more information since I asked that first question. She's writing in about herself. She says, how do you know if you have autism? Some days I feel like I don't have it. Sometimes I feel like I don't have it. I have had a diagnosis, but she says my social worker said I could have Tourette's. But she is saying that she does have a diagnosis, I believe.
That is, yeah. I mean, it is possible to have Tourette's and autism together. And it would be very, very important to identify if you have Tourette's, because there's a whole different series of treatments and such for Tourette's. And it would be really important to identify. And when it comes to autism, you could, it makes sense that you feel sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't, because autism is a really wide spectrum and lots of different symptoms. And sometimes you could have, exhibit some of the symptoms, but not the others. Don't forget, the more you learn, the more you lose the symptoms of autism. Autism is malleable. We can change it. So that's the whole purpose of what we do, of the therapy that we do, is to help people come out, lose their symptoms. And so it is possible that this repetition of words, if you feel that you have no control over it, if it's a repetition that just blurts out at any given time, it is possible that it could be Tourette's. I would really recommend that you see someone who is a specialist who can help you with that.
Thank you so much for that. Bonnie says, good morning. How can I help my 6-year-old son to get more conversational speech? He requests and answers yes or no, but does not engage in conversation. He is functionally verbal.
Right. Very good. And that's what we love to do. And so I would really, really recommend that you get on skills, because there's no one answer I can give you that helps you here. There's a million different lessons that your child would learn, and then we bring them together. So for example, your child is now functionally communicating with you, but we need to get them to the point where they're tacting or describing things that they see. And then we need to get them to the point where they are doing intraverbals, which is talking about things that are not physically present. And so there's steps to doing all of this. And along the way, we increase the vocabulary. So for instance, right now, he might just have a few verbs and a few nouns. We would need to increase the adjectives and just continue to put them together in sentences that are useful and functional, and that there's not to overwhelm anyone, but for children under the age of 8, there's roughly 4,000 lessons in our curriculum. So I really recommend that you look at both our skills curriculum, which is again skillsforautism.com. And there you will start by answering a lot of questions about your child. And as you answer these questions, we will be able to determine exactly what your child needs. So the program will only kind of give back to you a whole array of program lessons that your child needs, not things that he already has mastered, and not things that are above his age level, just the things that he needs to learn right now. And then the program will kind of guide you, and you will need to select a series of lessons so that you can work on those. You will need to have a technique, and obviously the technique I recommend is ABA, or Applied Behavior Analysis. And if you'd like to learn more about ABA, that's our other website, which is the Institute for Behavioral Training, which is ibehavioraltraining.com. And there you will learn everything about how to use the techniques of ABA to actually teach those skills to your child. A conversation is just one of many, many skills. And it's very, very doable. So please be encouraged. It's wonderful that he has functional communication. We can definitely help.
And we also had somebody with a 15-year-old wanting recommendations for conversational social skills. And we not only have, there's the availability for all of us to go and look at skills, but there is also Skills Living, which has things that are for older kids as well, although Skills itself has social conversational skills as well. So, but maybe we want to give both of those again, skillsforautism.com, and then there's skillsliving.com that would be very, very interesting for you to take a look at. Plus, which we have talked a lot about the different steps. I got to say, Dr. Granpeesheh, that we hear this a lot from people, that their kiddos are speaking, they're functionally communicating, that they're labeling things, that they can say yes or no, but everybody's trying to get to that conversation part. And I want to reiterate what you said, that in skills, it's very easy to see that arc. This whole last week, we've been doing the verbal operants for our Jargon of the Day. You guys can check those out on the playlist on our YouTube page or on our own channel. Through all of them and talk about them individually and why they and how they build so that you get to the conversation. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of times the problem is that there are, my internet is unstable. Sorry. The problem is that there are speech and language pathologists who are teaching labeling. And then there are some really great speech and language pathologists who understand the interverbal, but a lot don't. And this is why I really want to remind everybody why ABA is so important, and not just to take speech, because with ABA, you get to that conversation. Help me out here, Dr. Granpeesheh, do you agree?
I absolutely agree. And you said it really well, Shannon. I think that, I mean, it's useful to have functional speech, right? To be able to just say what you want, for instance. That's important. But it's a whole different level of useful when you get to conversation. I really think if any of our viewers go on skills and they look in just the social conversation lessons or just the language curriculum as a whole, they will see exactly what you and I are talking about here, because it really has a lot to do with just that. It's very good to have functional speech, but bringing all of it together. You know, conversation, Shannon, I've often said it has a lot to do with perspective taking, being able to see the other person's perspective. It has to do because you have to sort of pause, you have to pay attention to their response level. We have lessons, as you know, that deal with things like, how do I join a conversation when there's a group of kids around me? How do I change the subject? How do I repair the conversation if people look like they're about to walk away? How do I regulate myself so I'm not talking about just the things I like? How do you know? There's a million different aspects to conversation. At the very basic level, it starts by just being able to talk about things that are physically not in front of you, and those are the basic intraverbals. And so we have a really good path for conversation, and I do recommend that people should look at that.
And it's amazing when you see it in action. It's like one of the coolest things I've ever said. I always referred to it as the autism miracle in my living room. So I think it's remarkable. And that was what my son had, was exactly what you'll find in the skills curriculum. Okay, I'm going to move on because we got a bunch of questions. They really took my suggestion to heart to write in earlier. I'm already panicking. Are we going to get everything in? Okay, so be patient with me, you guys. Somebody wants to know, have you seen a kid progress really well and then regress and then progress? Or once they regress, is that it? Bad schooling and bad programming. And she also goes on to say that she's in mediation now, and your advice about how much information they should give the school, which is a tough one.
That is a tough one. Shannon, could you repeat it? I'm afraid you come in and out for me. I don't know if I'm also choppy for our viewers.
You have not been choppy for me, and I did get a thing saying my internet was low, so I'm going to work on that while you answer this question. But the question was, have you seen a kid progress really well and then regress and then progress? Or once they regress, is that it? And they're attributing it to bad schooling and bad programming, and they want to know if they should give information to the school while they're in mediation, how much to disclose.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I wouldn't, yes. So the entire course of 3 or 4 years of ABA is this whole, for the majority of kids, it's this process of progressing and either plateauing or regressing and then progressing again. So this back and forth thing is, I wouldn't worry too much. I would fix it, but I wouldn't think that it means anything bad. What it means can be a million different things. Yes, it could be that the particular therapists who are working with the child are not focused on the right things. It could be that the child is not sleeping. It could be that the child is having an allergic reaction to something. It could be that the child is eating something that is causing him or her to be a little bit more cloudy. I mean, it could be a million different things, right? So that is the whole, that's the job of your BCBA supervisor, is to sit with you. And at least in our clinics or in ABA, that's what we do, is we hope that our behavior analysts can sit and problem solve and figure out what is going on, because that's a very important thing. And that's why we meet regularly with our families. at least once every month to sit down and say, how are things? Are we still moving along? Because we see the data is maybe plateauing or it's gone backward. That kind of stuff happens all the time. And it's important to figure out what the reason is and to fix it. I think,
Sorry.
Shannon, I'm sorry, you're on mute.
I'm unmuted now. So we've got a parent who's writing in about a young man who is obsessive about things, and that in particular, right now, he's obsessive about, they're bringing me in the cord right now, that he's obsessive about women, that he's going up to women anywhere ages 5 to 55 and asking them to be his girlfriend. The hormones are a little bit crazy, and she's wanting to know what can she do to, because it's making it hard for people in the community who don't want to be around him and to make friends. It's all very, very difficult.
Yeah. Yep. And that is, that happens. And, we think it has a lot to do with this area called theory of mind or lack of perspective taking. A lot of our kids have a difficult time seeing another person's perspective simply because they don't see their own mind as being separate from other minds. So as a result of that, obviously, if you don't see the other person's perspective, you kind of start to see the world as your playground in a sense. And you don't really think, if I'm going to follow this person around, or I'm stalking someone, or I'm getting too close to them, you're not thinking about how they feel. You're not thinking, oh my God, this could be possibly making this individual very uncomfortable. Those are the things that, if you're in a good ABA program and when the child is young, we start teaching a lot of different lessons that have to do with taking someone else's perspective. In fact, honestly, Shannon, I think sometimes we go overboard in the sense that our kids end up being able to take other people's perspectives better than the norm. Like they just become extremely empathetic and sympathetic and very, very able to think about how others think, And if you're an adult and that has not been part of your overall development over many years, it's still not too late. You as the parent just have to understand that you need to kind of make some rules about things, and you need to explain things that might not, otherwise you might not think like, oh, why should I have to explain that? So I would maybe videotape the child or the adolescent when they're doing these things, and then later sit with him and explain, when you do this, how do you think this person feels? And just, if they don't know, just write it down. We use these things called comic strips. We'll draw figures and you'll say, you do this, and this is how this person feels. And, just have a feeling bubble that's like next to their heart. And it says they're feeling afraid, maybe they're feeling scared, maybe. And then you can have a thought bubble as well that says, what do you think they're thinking? And help your child by giving them the answers and helping them understand how different people feel if you get too close to their territory or in their territory or in their space.
I hate me this morning. I know. I hate me this morning. But I was just saying, I love this, and I wish we could give this training to everyone. And I think it's important that we give this training to all of our young men on and off the spectrum about what it feels like in personal space for a woman. And then, we, across the board, not just the male female thing, how we're making other people feel. I wish we had perspective taking for the world lessons. Okay, but I really want to get to this question because I really need to send a virtual hug to this mom. She says, I have a question regarding my nonverbal autistic daughter. She's 7 years old and I recently had a baby. and she can't stand the sound the baby, the newborn makes. She's been screaming and banging her head and literally crying tears. We've tried to separate them at all times. We tried slowly introducing the baby, which she doesn't mind when he's quiet, but as soon as he starts cooing, she gets upset. What can I do?
Yeah, so that is a very, very difficult situation. It is extremely important, first of all, to find out if the child is, if your daughter is crying and screaming because of the sound of the baby crying, which could be a sensory issue, which I will give you some suggestions for. Or if your child is screaming because they've now lost the attention they used to have from you, which is a very common thing when a second child comes into the family. So assuming that this is really a sensory issue, which please, all of our, like, over the years, I've learned that it is so important to pay attention to the fact that our kids really do have, some of our kids, not all of them, but some of them really, really do have very sensitive hearing. And it's important to give them a tool to survive. So I would suggest for your child, if you determine that it really is about the crying, and so the child, your other daughter doesn't have an issue with the baby, just has an issue when the sound of baby crying, then I would have your daughter buy your daughter some of these noise canceling headphones. I love those. They help our kids so much. Make a little area maybe in each room that you are with your children, like let's say in her room, in the living room, maybe in the kitchen, depending on how your house is. Like put a bean bag in the corner, put the noise canceling headphones there, put some of her favorite toys there. And when this happens, don't get mad at her at all, just guide her over. And in fact, maybe before it happens, I would suggest that you show your daughter how the noise canceling headphones work. Put them on her, play some of her favorite music. In fact, teach her to use them, because sometimes, and I forget, Shannon, if we know the age of the older child.
Seven.
That's great. So, I mean, she can use these with music. She can use them with something on a computer, like her favorite TV show or show on a computer, but teach her how to use them. And I promise you, it's life-changing when you teach your child how to use a tool, an object. It's just like going outside and putting your sunglasses on. Think of it that way. For our kids, they are very, very sensitive to certain sounds. And as long as we can teach them, especially when you're home. Now, when you're outside, it's a little bit of a different issue because of safety. But when you're home, she can absolutely block out that sound by putting on some headphones and looking or listening to something else. And actually, that location will become useful to you. We often use a kind of, this is my rest place. This is my kind of Shangri-La. It's my place where nobody can bother me. And if for any other reason, if your child starts to get upset, tell your child to go there. Shannon, when Nikki was very little, if she would start to tantrum or something, I had taught her, I would tell her, go to the hallway or go to another room. And she was so, even if she was super angry, she'd walk into another room, close the door, and like have her tantrum there and then come back out. And so, like, having a peaceful, nice area where you can like de-escalate is something good for the kids anyway. And I just think it's fair for our kids to be able to give them the ability to shut out certain noises. Now, nowadays, we're so lucky because you can actually gradually fade back from that. So those big ones that go over your ear, now the earbuds, now they make the ones that are actually somewhat noise canceling. So they go in your ear, you can kind of hear the outside, but not really. And then ultimately, of course, you can, fade even that away to regular headphones where you can hear the outside, but you can also hear something that you're listening to.
Amazing. By the way, many people are writing in and saying thank you and that your words are giving them so much hope. I just want, and somebody
Thank
said,
you.
love it, Doreen.
Thank you.
So question here about interverbals. Mom says, my son is still working on this, and she has a sad face. She says he's so fluent when it comes to doing echolalia, but when he's putting his own words together, it takes a bit longer.
Yeah, but and you should ask Mom, are you actually doing a full, how old is that child? Do we know?
She did not say, and I should know, but I don't remember.
The question is, how many hours are you doing ABA? How many hours of ABA are you doing? Is it good ABA? Is your child gradually making progress? You never go from echolalia to intraverbals. That just isn't the case. You go from echolalia to manding, manding to tacting, tacting to intraverbals. So there's a whole process that you go through, and it's important. It's like saying, you know, with a typically developing child, whether they can go from just saying mama to hi mom, how's your day? You can't really make that jump. You have to go through these steps.
Child is 11.
Okay. Even if the child is 11, so the question really is, how much practice or how much work is being done on this particular concept? And have you tried to, is your child manding? That means, is he requesting? Is he tacting? Is he pointing to objects and talking about them? Those are the steps that happened before.
So this mom wants you to know that her child is doing 20 hours of ABA right now. She's an RBT. And she said, no, we didn't. And yes, we did. And I don't know which, I don't know which thing that we didn't. And yes, we did. I'm so sorry.
No, it doesn't matter. If you're an RBT, fantastic. Like, we have nothing else to worry about at this point.
Yeah. It's just stay the course, right?
And going on the right course. So you are an RBT, get on skills, please. Please, I am begging you to go on skills. It will change your life. You'll understand it because you're an RBT. You'll fully get it and you'll follow it, and it will take your child to places you cannot believe. So please get on skills, and it will guide you step by step how to move him or her forward.
And she wants you to,
how wonderful that this mom has the ABA knowledge.
Yes, and he is manding and tacting. So you know, and she says, I was just kind of making a statement, but I'm glad that we talked about it honestly, because there are other people who don't know what you know that needed to hear that it is frustrating, and that, you know, but that you are doing all the right things and you're staying the course. And she has been doing that since he's 3. So that's wonderful. Okay, I'm starting to feel that thing of we're not going to get to everything, but somebody has written in and several times, so I'm going to attend to it. How many types of autism are there?
Oh gosh, you know, that's a really good question, and there are so many different types of autism. I'll try to answer that as a clinician who has seen kids for 40 somewhat years. And then I'll try to answer it as a kind of scientist researcher, because we've also published on this. Mm-hmm. So as a clinician who's been seeing kids for 42 years, there's autism, the symptoms of autism also have changed over the years. The type of autism that I used to see back in the 80s is different. I don't see that level of severity anymore, thankfully, because we used to see very, very, very severe autism, stuff that you guys in this world, in this lifetime, you wouldn't believe. But there are many different types of children, just like there are many different types of people in the world. So there are children who are visual learners. That's really important. They have a very, very strong visual memory. And with those children, we have to learn to teach them everything through a visual modality. Like, they need to see pictures or something visual that helps them. They learn better that way. There are hyperlexic children. So these are children who have an uncanny ability to read and manipulate letters. And these kids often teach themselves how to read things from age 2 without anyone even teaching them. With those children, we use the written word a lot to help them to start to communicate and to learn. There are children who are always going to be nonverbal, but that doesn't mean that they can't communicate. Their being nonverbal could have to do with a million different things, that one of which could be just apraxia. They could have very severe inability to move their tongue around, so they can't really produce words or sounds. That's okay. A lot of those children go on to communicate through augmentative devices where they type, or icons where they can touch, or even they can do sign language. So there's a whole variety, and then those are just a few examples of different children. Like, you have children who will have a hard time learning if you present a stimulus to them up close and you have to have the stimulus out far. So I can't even begin to list the different types of autism. I can tell you that over the years, we have gathered millions of data points in our database, which is skills database. And so we look at how children learn. So the two things, skills measures a lot of things, but the two very important things for me that are measured on skills is, how fast is the child learning and how fast are their challenging behaviors decreasing, right? Those two things. And so when you look at those two things as an outcome measure, and you look at all the other variables in the child's life, like, for instance, if a child sleeps well, they learn faster. If a child doesn't have an underlying medical illness, they learn faster. If a child doesn't have pain from a physical illness, they're not going to have a lot of challenging behaviors. Those types of correlations. And when you look at all of the children globally, so we looked at something like 9,800 children and several million data points, and we were able to see 16 specific subtypes. And those specific subtypes had to do with these learning patterns, the way kids learn. Some kid, and it had to do with, oh, look, this subtype all learn these particular lessons very quickly. This is the visual subtype. These kids don't even have an issue with the majority of their basic programs. This is the sort of Asperger's subtype. So we were able to find these 16 behavioral subtypes. I think there's more than that. And I think they definitely, through our data set, you can see it, they all kind of overlap a little bit with each other. And what's important, I think, is that ultimately on one side of the spectrum, it kind of starts to merge into ADHD, and then it starts to just merge into what we call typical. And it's very interesting because it's not just about, when we think of autism, we only think about weaknesses or areas of deficit, but it's not really the case. A lot of our kids with autism also have incredible strengths that the typical population, us, we don't have. They have amazing memory. They have incredible musical talent. They have incredible artistic talent. They have unbelievable like visual memory or ability to memorize things and keep them. And they have specific mathematical abilities that we don't have. There's a lot of stuff that some of the kids have. So it's just the way to look at it is in my mind, after 40 years, is to just kind of look at it as an extension of, like in research, there's this thing we call the normal curve, right? And it's just It's a curve. I think it's called the U-shaped curve in lay language or whatever, but it's basically the majority of people fall kind of in the middle. And then there are outliers, right? There are people who are extremely talented, and then there are people who have extreme issues or deficits, right? And so I see autism as having a little bit of both. They're just extreme differences. And our goal has always been not to necessarily completely eliminate all of those differences, but to bring the individual into the norm so that they can function well in life. That's really the key. And I think that's the way to look at it. It's like you never really want to change the kind of the quirks or the personality of the individual, because some of that stuff is just their brilliance. And it comes out when they're able to communicate. What you want to do is try to teach them all the things that help them function in society. You know, like right now is a great example, Shannon, with COVID. You know, if I say, hey, everything is fine with me, but I refuse to put on my mask. I just refuse for whatever reason. Well, I'm not going to be able to go outside. I won't be able to because people won't let me, right? So there's certain things like that with autism. Like if someone says, I don't want to put on my clothes, well, you can't go outside. If I just, you know, I don't want to, I'm going to scream everything that I want. Well, you can't mingle with people then. So that's what we're trying to do, is trying to teach all the things that allows the person to live with as well as they can in society. Long answer.
I love it though. And a lot of people are writing in how much they love skills and saying skills definitely covers it all. It's mind blowing. One parent is writing in and saying that they're having a little bit of trouble figuring skills out. They're not a card parent. They're wanting to know who to connect to. And I just want to be clear that so there are card parents. If you're already in card, you already have a skills account. And there are people in your office and you're on your team that are prepared to help you with skills. If you are not a card family, you can still get access to skills. That's still available to the public. It's a different group of people. But if you're here, and I always say, you know, call over to skills if you want to get, it's a subscription, it's a monthly thing. Ask them for the friends and family discount from Autism Live. Tell them that you heard it here and they will give you a discount. I think it's 10%, and 10% is nothing to sneeze at, right? But for this mom, you know me, and I'm happy to walk through skills with you. I love to take a walking tour of skills with a family member because it keeps me refreshed on skills, because I used it for a lot of years and I don't personally anymore. So it almost be doing me a favor. So you can write directly to me. We'll set up a time, and you already communicate with me. So I think we're going to be fine. Okay, so somebody else wrote in and said, by the way, we have a lot of people watching from India and Dubai today. Welcome, everyone.
Okay.
Yes. Somebody says, ma'am, I have a 4-year-old child with mild autism. She is a nonverbal child with some babbling, and also she is restless. Ma'am, if you kindly can give me your valuable suggestions from YouTube. There we go.
Yeah, I really would recommend for our families that they should. If I was just starting out in the field, Shannon, I think, and I agree with that one family, skills can be overwhelming. It's not as user friendly as I would like it. I always say that we ended up putting too much into skills, but IBT is very user friendly, and I think I would start there. If I was a parent, I think the most useful thing would be to learn some of the techniques. So what I recommend for that family is to go on ibehavioraltraining.com. And Shannon, as you know, IBT is very, very inexpensive. Some of the modules of training that we have put on IBT are like, you know, $12. And these are video trainings by subject. So for example, you as a starting parent, if you go on there, you will see a whole list of really interesting topics that you might be interested in to learn. So just things like, what is ABA? How does it work? What should I do when my child has a tantrum in public? How should I teach my child language? There's a lot of really, really good topics on there, and you just pick one and you can view it, and you have access to it for, I think, a month or maybe more. I'm not sure how long once you purchased it. You can get a lot of people to come and view it and learn that module, and then do another one next week and do another one next week. And I promise you, if you gather, especially times like this, if you have a team of people helping you and you all watch one video per week, in 2 months, you will know quite a lot more, and you'll then be able to start actually setting up a program and working with your child.
Yes, and I want to say that every week during this COVID emergency, there are some of the trainings that are available for free. I haven't gotten the email this week about which ones, but I'm looking to see if I can get that information before we finish the show today. But we've only got a couple of seconds here. But go to ibehavioraltraining.com. There is a phone number, and you can call and say, Shannon didn't know which ones were free this week. And you can do that. And people are asking, Traven, if you would post the links to skills and IBT in the comments so that they have them. I think that would be really great. We probably only have time for one more question, but I think it's a really important one. And by the way, yes, they're writing in asking, is it available in the UK? Yes, it's available worldwide. And somebody wanted to know, somebody wanted to know if we were recording this, and yes, we are. So you can always look back at this and watch this later. But the question I think I want to end on, because it's one that's really, I think, a very important question. Is NET better than table work doing ABA? My son seems to learn more through NET. And for some people who don't, like, there are probably people who don't know what NET is. But we've only got 5 minutes.
Sure. Of course. Yeah, and I have to be right on time as I have another show right after this, something else. Okay, so NET stands for Natural Environment Training, and it is a type of ABA. So let's start with that. When they talk about table time, I think they're referring to discrete trial training, or DTT, which is a more structured form of ABA. So what we do here at CARD is that we generally will start with a type of ABA that's called errorless. And that means we give a lot of help to the child so that they don't make any errors. It is a form of DTT. And so DTT is based on the premise that you give a stimulus, you give a signal or an instruction, and then you wait for the child to respond, and then you reinforce it. And that's a discrete trial. So it starts with your instruction, the child's behavior, and then the consequence, A, B, C, or antecedent behavior consequence. And that is a discrete trial. And you do many of those back to back. And when you teach something, and it's a lot more complicated than that. I just kind of simplified it, but it is NET is much less structured. So we generally will start with DT. Once something is mastered in DTT, we will move to an NET format just to make sure the child generalizes. That means we want to make sure the child will use that, whatever they learned, in real life. And NET is like real life. It's like walking around the house and talking about the things and pointing out. I find it's more effective if you combine discrete trial and natural environment rather than do one or the other. Because discrete trial is like intensive tutoring. It teaches your child the subjects faster, and you don't have time. And NET then makes the child realize how this applies to their real life. So the combination, always doing discrete trial and a little bit of NET and a little bit of discrete trial, a little bit of NET, is what I recommend. Now, having said that, You want to make sure your discrete trial format is very rewarded, because some children just react negatively to that kind of structure, and you have to kind of work them into it. You want to give a lot of rewards so the child gets used to it. No child really likes to sit and have, 30, 40 hours of intensive tutoring. So it is very understandable if a child reacts initially, but it is good for them because they learn very fast through DTT. I mean, if you just do DTT, on the other hand, many children have a hard time applying it to their real life. So a combined method is better.
I love that answer. And I just want to say from a parent perspective that a lot of times we think that our kids are learning more from the NET because that's when the good part comes, but the DTT laid the groundwork on which the good stuff could come. So please listen to Dr. Granpeesheh and do both of them. We only have a minute and a half here, but I do have what is free from IBT the rest of this week. So the trainings, so if you go to ibehavioraltraining.com, and then you're going to go to the top where it says community, family, and then you click on that. Then there's another drop-down menu. You'll pick parent training. And then the trainings that are free this week are tackling autism as a family. So that includes explaining the diagnosis to others, who needs to know and who doesn't, explaining the diagnosis to my friends and family, explaining autism to my other children, explaining autism to my child with autism, preparing for the holidays, making holiday breaks a success, preparing for spiritual situations, how to support my child in our house of worship, how to have a success at the doctor's office, and preparing my home to prevent emergencies. There's more. Preparing for after school activities and camps.
I'm going to leave you, Shannon.
What's that?
Yeah, I'm going to leave you if that's okay.
Okay. No, you go. Thank you. We adore you. You go, and I'll talk to you later. Love you. Bye. Also preparing for after school activities and camps, how to choose the right after school activities, camps, and hobbies for my child, ethical issues, dual relationships, what are they and how to avoid them. And the last one, why children with autism may be victims of abuse and what you should know. They are all free. So you go again at the top of the page, it'll say Health and Human Services. You click on that. Then you click on Caregiver. Then you click on Parent e-learning. And then when you get them in your cart, all of those trainings that I just listed off, you want to put in the code COVID-19. It is all caps, and there is a hyphen between the COVID and the 19. So COVID, all caps, hyphen or dash 19. And then if you did what's right and picked only the ones that were free, it will zero your account out, so you will owe absolutely nothing. That's at ibehavioraltraining.com. That's just this week. Like, I don't know if that changes on Friday or Monday. So get them. If you get them now, go in and get them now, and then you'll have them. And I do think you get to have them for a month. So I hope that you guys will take part in that. I want a little programming note here. We are not going to be live tomorrow or Friday. We've been trying to be live every single day. And we just did some really great shows last week. And so we're going to replay the episode tomorrow that was Temple Grandin talking about how to find and feed your child's passion. So it's a replay, but it's going to air tomorrow. And then on Friday for Let's Talk Autism, we're going to replay our show from last week with Nava and Matt Asner. We're going to be back doing live shows on Monday. I'm just going to be honest that I need to take a couple of days because of the loss of my friend Joanne. I need some time to process that and to work on her memorial, which we will be doing a week from Saturday for anybody who is interested and would like to. It's going to be online, a worldwide event with amazing speakers and some amazing performers to remember the life and celebrate the life of Joanne Lara. If you are wanting to support Joanne and her efforts, what she did for the autism community, please feel free to make a donation. There's no flowers. It's a virtual ceremony. There's no flowers. Please feel free to make a donation. You can go to autismworksnow.org or autismmovementtherapy.org, and there are places to donate there. But I will be back with you on Monday. And I just want to thank you all, because I know it's been a really rough week for me, and having your friendship and your compassion and being here with me has meant the world to me. So thank you all. I will see you next Monday, but please tune in to watch the pre-recorded shows. But until Monday, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.